minus 1 minute. T minus 50 seconds. T minus 40 seconds. T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Walk to Westport.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Real Cannabis. I'm very stoked about this show today. We've got Mr. Spliff of Cannabis. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Again, we kind of got introduced through a mutual acquaintance. Gabby,
Yes.
Staten Island. You have been talking to him, and he says, "Hey, you should talk to Chad Westport." Meanwhile, I'm talking to Gabby, and Gabby's like, "Dude, you should really talk with Mr. Spliff of Cannabis." So we made it happen, and I'm stoked for a variety of reasons. You know, you put out a lot of good content on your YouTube channel, which I will link down in the show notes. You did a really rad seed one the other day. I love the seed collectors. But
Right.
I'm stoked about many things. But one thing in particular is you're from Washington. So we're homers here. We're both from Washington.
Yep. Born and raised.
And awesome. Because I want to get into some of that. You know, I always joke, but I'm serious with people. It's like I was a teenager in the Pacific Northwest. So teenager in the 90s. You know, we were talking a second ago. Good time to be a kid in the 90s musically. But when it comes to like cannabis, we've always been really spoiled in the Pacific Northwest. My joke is like, I'm old, but I've never touched brickweed in my life. Beasters is the worst thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, right. When we were teenagers, I'm 45, so we're really close in age. And the blood plant that used to come down from up north, like it smelled a certain way, it looked a certain way, it tasted a certain way. The high was always the same, and it was the middles that was around when you couldn't find local, you know. So we had our own brickweed, and I never saw brick until I moved to Arizona for a year. And I asked a dude if he'd give me an ounce, and he's like, "Yeah, it's $80." And I was like, $80. And then I saw it, and I was like, "What is this?" And he's like, "It's weed." I was like, "According to who?" You know?
Right? The fuck?
There was Washington was definitely now, mind you, when we were younger, it was hard to find it, you know, and we weren't of age to be trusted, and so finding local could be a little bit difficult. But man, when you did, absolute fire, right? Like the guys back in those days took their job a lot more seriously rather than all the farmers these days that are just happy to get a plant. And I get it. Everybody loves cannabis and wants to cultivate, but when we were youth, it was done by guys that if they were going to risk the biscuit, they were going to do it right. And you know, there was a lot of money in play at that time too. It ain't I mean, dude, I got guys that hit me up that like I don't move weight at all, never have. And I got guys calling me up for $600 and $800 pounds finished. I'm like, what? So It's a different world these days, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a much different world. I mean, and this was definitely pre-legalization in Washington. This was pre-med system in Washington, which, really kind
Yep.
of opened it up as far as like acceptance of doing these
Right.
things. But yeah, there's the Pacific Northwest. I mean, even just the whole West Coast, all the way from California, from like LA to Vancouver. There's a
Hmm.
good history there. And maybe it's just because of the climate. Maybe it's just because of some of the things that we had out here as far as like different strains. But I didn't, it wasn't until really the mid to late 90s that I actually started hearing names with a lot of the things.
Right.
Like you
Likewise.
said before, it was, you just kind of get things, and it was just like, like, and another fun joke I always have is it was either called got some or don't got some. That's what weed was.
Dude, I can remember the August droughts all the time, and that's where you were
Yes.
begging anybody that knew anybody, can you find weed? You'd spend hours on the phone, calling every fucking guy you knew. And sometimes you hit that magic spot, and dude's like, yeah, my dad's got a bunch. And you're like, what? So, and it has a name. The first time we
Yeah.
had anything named was Northern Lights. And
Hmm.
that was, we got the number 2 and the number 5 from our buddy's dad, and he's like, this is called Northern Lights. And we're like, what does that mean? He's like, every particular strain has a name, and it's important that you learn it, so when you find something you like, you know what you're seeking out. And so, not that you would ever see it again, right? As a youth, you're like in high school smoking weed, you're like, yeah, it's awesome. And but yeah, that was like probably about like 96 we started hearing names, and
Yeah.
it wasn't just purple or green, or some guys like, this is Alaskan thunderfuck, and we're like, whoa. So I can definitely yeah, I had the same experience.
And those, I love that you mentioned those too, because those were kind of the names that I was hearing. And, I don't know
Hmm.
if it's just because I became aware of it, like listening to Cypress Hill, Hits from the Bong, Stones the Way the Walk, those
Right.
songs were coming out and they had names in them. But yeah, it was, so if you did get something with a name here, it was either Northern Lights, Alaskan Thunderfuck, or AK-47. Those
Yep.
are like the names that I remember being around at that time when you were able to find more of that, that kind bud. Because yeah,
Hmm.
we were just young kids. I didn't know where it was coming from. You had to do the pager freaking like chain mail of like pager codes and all of this stuff. And then eventually, like
Oh, I
3 hours
forgot about that.
later, homie shows up with a 10 sack, like this
Yeah.
big that he's
Yeah.
pinched this
Oh,
much off of.
dude, that was exactly it. Like, you're doing anything you can to get smoke. And I remember when we were probably about 17 in high school, and we were trying to get some L. And we met this, I had a friend at school was like, oh, dude, no problem. I know the guy. And I'm like, okay. And then we hit this dude up,
Okay.
go and meet him in Factoria.
Yeah.
And we're like in one of the parking lots, and they're like got their hood up on their car, and they can't get their car started. And the dude's like, is there any way that you guys could give us a ride to our house? And we're like young nice kids, we like to party, but we're like, absolutely. Gets in the back seat, this dude's like literally tearing 25 off with his fingers and just like touching the blotter, and I'm like, oh my god. So we get that, and we're driving him home, and the closer we get to his house, the closer we're getting to my house. And I
Oh
tell this
no.
dude, I'm like, hey, just so you know, I live in the apartments at the top of the hill where we're going. Um, I don't want you to think it's weird, but I live up here. So if you ever see me, I'm not chasing you. And he's like,
Yeah,
I live in the apartments
right.
too. Yeah, and this dude's like, oh, I live in the same apartments. And I'm like sitting there for a second, and he just hands me his number. He's like, I know you're about to ask. And he's like, you're totally cool. And so we went from searching the ends of the earth weekly to get smoke to meeting a guy that lived in my apartments. And my younger brother smoked as well, and we were looking for a dub sack that night. And I was like, I'll handle it. And I call my dude, and he's like, yeah, I'm leaving the house right now. I can meet you at the bottom of the apartments. And so I get the money, and I go outside, and literally pulls up, hands me a bag, and hand him the money, he leaves. And I walk back inside, and my brother's like, did you forget your keys? Because I was going to get weed. And I come right back in, and I like roll the bag out. And like, I hadn't seen it yet. And I look at it, and it was super fire, dude. And like, now we had a hookup literally in our backyard. And it was the greatest convenience ever. And we knew him forever. And that's where a lot of my awareness started when I met this dude, because he only fucked with fire and his dad had been in the industry for a long time and they knew a bunch of guys. And that's when we started seeing the green fritter, the grapefruit, the kryptonite, the American Beauty, the exotics, the northern, like they had a bunch of fire. And but those old days of searching and hunting for a bag, all of a sudden you're calling kids from different high schools and they're like, who are you? And you're like, remember we smoked that one time? And the guy's like, yeah,
Totally.
you know.
You
So
dated my friends, you remember?
yeah, exactly. I was just hoping you could help me out, bro. So it's different these days. Kids are like, we would stand outside of like the gas station back in the day and be like, hey, some guys walking in, can you buy us beer and cigarettes? We're just posted up outside the door, right? These days, the same thing's happening with the weed shops, where these young kids, they have no idea the abundance, the availability. They're like, I got hash, I got pens, I got flour, I got edibles, I got RSO. And I'm like, must be nice.
Yeah, the guy who like
Yeah.
opens his coat, everything is there.
Dude, I mean, the dispensary world is crazy. And with that, I'd say a lot of education kind of flew by people because they never had to go through the struggle to find what they really loved. And now there's just all these choices. And then learning what real good weed is. Like, I don't think a lot of people have seen fire for a long time. So God bless the craft growers out there that, if you got 10 lights or less and you're paying attention to it, that's where the very best weed comes from. So, a lot of
I
different
agree.
scenarios in this modern cannabis industry, isn't there?
There is, and I almost feel bad for, kids these days because, we're talking flower here. A lot of kids
Yep.
just bypass that these days because it's easy to get a vape cart.
Yep.
Vape carts don't smell, easier to
Right.
hide, take
That's a
anywhere. So it's
huge
like a
part of
lot
it.
of, yeah, it sucks. It's like, because the neighborhood kids, the bad ones, like, I wish you guys were smoking a joint, but I catch them behind the fence all like sharing a vape pen. I'm like, really,
Yep.
guys?
Yep.
Like, come on.
It's, and I think that there's something probably semi-nefarious with some of the modern concept of how to make concentrates. It's like, I think the human body was meant to consume, like, again, if cannabis finishes in October, early November, and then the winter comes and you're dried and cured, then you can take it into the hills and wash it, ideally, right? Like if there's snowfall and you live in proximity to highlands, then
Yeah.
it's interesting how it finishes in time to utilize your smalls and the stuff that you won't be, keeping or jarring. But the way things are these days with some of the distillates and the hydrocarbon stuff is and even with rosin, I don't think we know enough about it. And just as an example, rosin would be like skinning a grape, and it's just the internal contents, where we're doing the same thing with resin heads, right? We're squishing them, pulling all the innards out through the bag, and then so I wonder what the long-term implications are of people that didn't just consume mostly flour, and I smoke mostly, but I'll take a dab here and there because, again, flour stinks, and my daughter's like, you smell funny. So, um, but flour is a really special thing too. Like, so Mr. Spliff, I roll spliffs, a little bit of tobacco in my weed, but I've always been a joint smoker. And for sure, we had glass throughout our youth all the time because you're trying to take them power hits. Back in the day, I can remember we'd get the
To
bag
the
of
head.
at all. It
To
was
the
a feat.
head.
It wasn't about getting stoned or enjoying the weed with your friends. We're getting baked. These days, it's all about the experience. So having flour and
Yeah.
especially rolling a joint and breaking it down in that process, there's something to it, and related to that, when I was in Germany in 2006, I met these guys that were they were a little bit older than me. They were hardcore partiers in their early life, like to the point where they were lucky they got out of it.
Right.
And
Oh yeah.
they had found major refuge in cannabis, post being a party junkie or whatever. And so they would tell me that they get high just from smelling the flower. And they're like, not physically like you would get from cannabis, but there's a chemical reaction that happens when you break that flower and smell it. And that was a kind of a profound moment for me because terps do so many things, and it's like having the dry pull off the joint. There's something else that happens. There's some anticipation or excitement, and I think that there's a lot of the complete process that's lost by just taking dabs or primarily being a pen smoker.
Mhm.
It's the result without the process, you know what I mean?
Well,
So
there's
I think we're very fortunate to grow up when we did, and we got to pray for the youth. So um and the cost of flour, used to be, I mean, I would say that what we were paying on the streets back in the day is what people are paying in the dispensaries now, but the
yeah.
quality difference, the work that you had to do to get it led to why it meant so much to consume it. These days, it's like
Mhm.
going to 7-Eleven. You're like, can I have my Slurpee? Okay, bye-bye. So, and the Slurpee doesn't even come with the fancy coin. You remember the baseball coins, the holographic coins when we were
Oh
kids?
wow! Yes, I did on the bottom of the cup. You pop it off. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Flashback right
Mm-hmm.
there, brother.
Big dog stuff, back when we was little kids.
Right? I mean, whenever there's a financial incentive, we've learned from every other industry that's ever existed,
Yep.
businesses will cut corners. And when it comes to the distillate, the concentrates, there's some amazing stuff out there, like we said, the craft small batch stuff, but that's not the
Yep.
majority of what people have access to. And so me too,
No.
I am afraid of what we're going to learn in the future. And that's part of a big reason why, like, I want legalization or decriminalize it, because I want universities to be able to study it. I love cannabis. I believe in it
Yep.
medicinally, but I'm also open to the idea that we might be missing something. And a perfect
Agreed.
example is the combustion temperatures of certain terpenes. When dabbing came around and stuff, it's like redder is better, the hotter the better the hit. But we've learned, like limonene in particular, if you heat that up to a certain point, it's dangerous. So
Right.
there's
Right.
probably some things we're missing, and I want to know
I
that.
agree.
But we're not going to figure it out until we're able to legally study this crap. But they're going to find out a whole bunch of good stuff too, so that's probably why they're not allowing it.
Right. Well, I wonder what we've been shielded from, right? That's always the biggest
Mhm.
concern, is that not so much that we don't know, but that others do. And that
Right.
with that, particular cultures within particular industries are pushed so heavily. And, I get like why rosin became so big, because it's people don't have to trim up and cure and go through that. Like as soon as the harvest is done, it's frozen, it can be processed and finished in a week. And then there are the little jars that can just go everywhere,
And
and people are
the
about
yeah, that's sorry to interrupt you, but that is one of the things
children.
that I think a lot of people miss in this. It's like the market wasn't necessarily asking for concentrates. What the market said is, we're not going to pay you jack for your flour. Everybody has this tons of
Yep.
flour, and they're like, but if I do this and turn it into this, it's a lot easier to fit in a bumper. It's a lot more,
Hmm.
cost effective. So why don't we do that, guys? So
Yeah.
it's interesting how that still drives, like, the market. It's
In
people just had all this flour. They just want,
Without a
smash
doubt.
the trash. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, and even full runs being turned into hash because, come on, my point. Oh, yeah, yeah. So I've had a bunch of friends that built out major gardens here in Washington, and how they got their licenses, I still don't know. But anyway, they would go and look at local real estate and say that they were charging $3 or $4 a foot. Well, as soon as they told them they were getting into cannabis, it was $16 a foot.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
So square footage went up like 4x in price. And so all of a sudden, these businesses that got involved with plans of even doing it right, and either, doing a really beautiful amended soil or using a top clean nutrient line, and having all this employment, they've got staff, they've got different subsections of what people are doing, be it concentrates or trimming or harvesting or defoliating or gardening or packaging. Now all of a sudden you've got all this overhead, and you start looking at that overhead, and sometimes just to make payroll, you've got to sell stuff at 50% of what it's worth, and then
Right.
you get that situation where that dispensary is like, oh, well, we did really well with it at that price, but I don't think we want it at full price. and you can't sell your own herb in Washington. So like, unlike a lot of other states, there's been a lot of, I think that's super criminal that they can do that, that you basically are stuck operating through a gatekeeper, and the dispensaries make way more money than any garden does. You know, it's
By
so
far.
it's an interesting thing that they've given us this recreational, and I'm all about the decriminalization and allowing people to. Now, mind you, there still needs to be certain operating issues, like don't do it right next to a school. Maybe
Yeah.
churches don't want to smell that stuff, or near federal buildings or whatever it is. But it's changed a lot, and I think it's really cool that it's become so mainstream. But the hyper acceleration of new people seems that like there's a bunch of good information that's being left behind, and that's something Gabby and I were talking about, is like telling the story of where people like us came from, and perspective. Guys like us are kind of, we're not the old dogs. We're like that middle ground between the guys that like really paved the way and
Yep.
went through growing pains and stress and crazy cops that even we didn't really see, because I've been pulled over, not pounds in the car, but smoked out, dumb, and the cops are like, "Go home, you idiot," because it just became more commonplace. But
Right.
the industry has changed, and it's part of why I love sour and chem and OG so much, is it just takes me back. Those are the flavors I preserve or prefer, but it's not the modern hype mentality. It's about taking your time and enjoying it, and that's why I like smoking spliffs. Every hit is green. It's repetitive, deep breathing. It's almost like a meditative type, state, and
Yep.
yeah, it's changed a lot, and hopefully we can get to the point where we can get universities to have a better look at not just the whole overview, but individual, genetics and how they work. Because my mom had gotten super sick with cancer, started in like 2005, and by 2009 had like grown through the outside of her chest and was on the outside of her body. And she went through the surgeries, and they started giving her chemo, and she was just not doing well, dude. Like on her deathbed for a while, and she had moved in with me. So I had this fancy idea. I was like, well, she's going to be feeling like shit. I'm going to at least make sure she feels good. So I started brewing coffee in the morning, and I would put like a half a gram to a gram of bubble hash, but
Okay.
like a quarter inch of the coffee get in there. And then I would pull some out and shake up the hash and then pour it back in. And my mom woke up and she's like, "Oh, you made coffee?" And I was like, "Yeah, I thought you might like some." So she drinks a cup of my can of coffee, which I'd never made before. And it had sat for like a half hour. I swirled it around and kept it on the heat plate. She drinks like, maybe 5 or 6 ounces of it. 20 minutes later, dude, like this is a woman with no energy, like barely able to function. We have an apartment with like an island where the kitchen and the cupboards are, and she's just walking circles, dude. Like Energizer Bunny. And I look at her, and I'm like, you doing all right? She's like, yeah, I feel great. And I'm like, clearly, she don't look stoned either. She just slowly sipped that coffee, and there's probably 8 or 9 cups in this big craft, like, coffee maker thing, and she's like doing really well. And so I started making that coffee every day for like months. She was drinking it. And the oncologist brought us in, my younger brother, my older brother, and I, and he's like, "So your mom's doing like really well," and he's like surprised by it. I'm like, "I thought you guys were treating her, using Western medicine." And he's stumped. He's stumped. He's like, "Your mom's like doing well in every category, and we can't figure it out. Like it's expected that she gets better with treatment, but we can't figure out what's going on." So I happen to be wearing a dirt bike jacket. It's like a Fox dirt bike jacket. It's like a tough material on the outside. Well, the liner of the jacket is like magic liner. It holds on to smells forever. And
Oh
we had
no.
driven to the hospital in my van, and I took the weed out of my pocket and left it in the van because I was like, I don't want to go in with weed in my pocket.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then we're going to leave, and the oncologist is like, "Hey, can I talk to you real quick?" And I'm like, yeah, what's up? It's like, "Your mom lives with you, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, why?" He's like, "You stink like weed." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I smoke a lot." And he's like, "Okay, like, do you smoke in the house?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Is your mom's door open to her bedroom?" I was like, "Oh, yeah." I'm trying to figure out why your mom's having like such rapid improvements.
Wow.
Um, and I looked at him and started smiling. And he's like, what's up with the grin, dude? I was like, well, I mean, I have been making her cannabis coffee every morning, unbeknownst to her, for like 5 months. And he's like, what? And I'm like, well, I grow weed and I make bubble hash. I've got this little bubble man plastic washing
Yeah.
machine and these cool bubble man bags. And, I was still kind of new to it, but I'd make these, not temple balls. They weren't aged, but always from dried and cured weed. I prefer dried and cured to make hash versus fresh rosin. Live rosin's great and all, but
Hmm.
doesn't feel the same, right? So I told him, I was like, yeah, I've been making cannabis coffee every morning and putting bubble hash. And he's like, what's bubble hash? So I explained the process to him, and he's just like, that's got to be it. He's like, I seriously, none of my other patients are having this improvement or reaction to the
Hmm.
medicine that your mom is. And I was like, should I stop? He's like, no. And so just from that alone, he was like, he redirected a lot of his time to studying cannabis and the way that the endocannabinoid system works, and he was certain that that has a lot to do with our body's ability to fight back, and not necessarily that like smoking weed is the cure, but
Hmm.
bolstering that endocannabinoid system, and kind of on the same subject, a mother who's never consumed cannabis, when she feeds her baby, when the baby's breastfeeding, the mom is passing on cannabinoids that are in that
Yes.
colostrum that regulate its sleep and feeding cycles. So it's like in humans to start. And that always perplexed me. I'm just like, interesting. So we have a long way to go to just look into not just this plant, obviously many, but it's like if I take ashwagandha and vitamins before I go to bed, dude, I sleep like a rock, like just out cold, drooling. Like ashwagandha is amazing, And so it'd be interesting to see the studies on cannabis and how it affects the body.
It would. And, the medicinal side is where I entered cannabis. It's like I started in the teens, just, doing it recreationally. I didn't understand it was medicinal for me. The older I got, the more I had physical problems and the more medicinal I realized
Uh-huh.
that it was. And that, unfortunately, in the today's modern market, nobody talks about, well, few people talk about medicinal benefits and the medicinal potential. It's like I almost say it was the Trojan horse for
Yep.
legalization. But I'm
Yep.
still firmly in the medicinal side because I've seen it improve my life. I've seen it improve other people's life. I'm going to be the first to say it's not for everybody, but everybody
Right.
does, to your point, have an endocannabinoid system. And right now, when it comes to major pharmaceutical breakthroughs, they're targeting that endocannabinoid system because they've kind of found it really regulates everything else. It kind of creates that
Yep.
homeostasis. So, yeah,
Yep.
they're clued in on it. GW Pharmaceuticals is now Jazz Pharma. They tend to lead the way. One of their main researchers, Dr. Ethan Russo, lived up on Vashon Island. And so I've been
Hmm.
lucky enough to kind of catch him at a few different like Canna events here around the Seattle area over the years, just talking about the endocannabinoid system and terpenes and how those really affect things. And back to the kind of the concentrate, why I prefer flower is, again, it's that whole plant medicine. There's nothing
Right.
that has been stripped away, isolated, lost due to processes. I am
Yep.
a 99% flower guy, but I will take dabs every now and then. I
Right.
have a pen for, high dosage delivery of CBD, but I get a different effect based off
Yep.
of whether it's the pen, whether it's the dab, whether it's the flower, and I prefer the flower much better. Um, Hats
100%.
off. Yeah, I know I'm kind of skipping around here, but hats off to that doctor for
Hmm.
just even recognizing and wanting to be like, what's different? Why this person? And then smelling you. And to that one, I'm gonna say takes one to know one. So
Yeah.
that
a
wasn't
hundred
his
percent.
first time.
That's too funny, and man, Vashon has always been not necessarily a hippie stronghold, but like a die-hard cannabis community. And I
Open
mean, that's
minds.
supposedly where Northern Lights comes from, was a native dude that lived out there. He was a chief and he had seed stock from back in the day. And I've known a lot of major players from Vashon throughout the years. And it's like, you find out somebody's like super and then like, where are you from? They're like, oh, Vashon, and it's like almost like cannabis royalty over there. They've always kept it quiet, but um, that in West Seattle, baby, just two
Yeah.
powerhouses of fire. Like, oh man. But it's funny with the concentrates. You can take a tire and a wheel off of a car and roll it down a hill. It'll roll just fine, but it's not going to get you anywhere. And so I feel that way with a lot of these concentrates. Like, again, are we being shielded from information where, if you get an overload of certain cannabinoids, does it throw the rest of the system out of whack? Because it feels like it's satiated, but it's not bringing, it's just the carrier. It's not the stuff that would be involved in the plant tissue itself. Um, and I mean, you can juice grass and stuff like that and get the benefits of some of the spike, the quick relief. But I think that there's a lot that's being missed, and I don't think it's for the people's best interest a lot of times. And big business is that
Mhm.
way. And as the
Yeah.
industry is flourishing and still in its infancy, again, a lot of these gardens they go into it with high hopes and then they realize all they can afford is Jack's, Peter's, Athena, or something like that, and
Right.
those turnkey situations were built for people that meet the bottom line and are like, oh God, like, how do we stay in business? We've just poured 4 or 5 million into this over 4 years and our investors are calling my phone. So the medicinal side is something, again, I think that everybody's in such a rush to get high, and forget all the madness. And I would also argue that a lot of the concentrates cause, um, and a lot of people won't like this, but it makes you an emotional wreck. If all you're doing is dabbing all day, it
Seen
is
that.
going to close down a big part of your humanity and make you very closed off. And that's not the same for everybody, but there's
Yeah.
things that are worrying about the modern movement that is like the tranquility and peace seems to kind of like escape from the industry, where that's really what it was about, like for us as youth,
Yeah.
is be it you came from a troubled home or really rich home where your parents didn't see you very often or didn't recognize you
Right.
as just being alive. So we all
Yeah.
had things that made us feel down or whatever, and cannabis wasn't a place to run away but a place to feel relief. And I don't know if that's quite the culture that's being brewed today. So it's
Kids are never going to have that dealer's couch experience. The dealer's couch experience is where, because again, I started in my teens, I was young. Everybody
That's
wait
so
till you're
perfect.
21. But, I met people from different schools, from like different walks of
Yep,
life. Like I was the skater punk rock kid, but I'd be sitting on the dealer's couch next to the fucking star quarterback from,
yep.
Juanita. You're like, you smoke weed? All right, I
Yeah,
guess we're
dude, that's
cool
it.
then.
I was the athlete guy. I was like, I played for the Seattle Sounders farm team, premier
Oh,
soccer my whole
sweet.
life. Like, and then I injured myself, like, not myself, but my knees just fell apart, and the doctors
Yeah.
are trying to feed me Vicodin, Percocet, all these
Oof.
things that have been recalled, like Altram, Vioxx, Celebrex, and I'm like, I am not your lab rat. And the doctors were upset that I would smoke cannabis. And I'm like, dude, I get way more mental relief from my pain because it's going to be there no matter what, but definitely people from all walks of life, and the dealer's couch, dude. You'd show up and you're like, yeah, I'm going to get my weed and leave. No, the fuck you're not. You're
You
here
can't you
for an
can't
hour
just
and a
come and
half.
go,
You're
man. People
going
can't
in the
just be
car
coming and
down the
going.
street. Dude, and the dealer's couch is parallel to the buddy sitting in the passenger seat, like in a car down the street, watching all these cars going by, like, please don't be a cop, please don't be a cop. Like, oh man, the dealer's couch. That's so funny, man. So good. It's like I wanted to talk to Gabby and Not So Dog about the old school days, and I keep bringing it up, but I'll make it a subject matter for them too. But these days you can get like there's all these vac seals, there's fancy jars, there's Miron jars, there's all sorts of bags. But when we were young kids, there wasn't a lot of things to keep weed in to keep the smell down. So if you met up with a buddy and he had the 35 millimeter film can with the gray top, you knew you were in for a good time. You know, there's like 3 grams in there, and you're like, oh, he's got a film canister. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and that was the first thing we would go rifle through my buddy's dad's shit because he was cool. He's like, just don't take it all. You know, and he would have
Right.
like 50 of those jars that were spent. So we're like going through them and tapping out all the crumbs to make a joint. And it's a different world these days, that's for sure. So, what
Yeah,
is your favorite cut strain of all time?
oh, geez. That's probably rotating, but the one that is always in the top 3 is Chem 91.
Oh yeah.
That's not something that I've grown myself, but I do love a good Chem 91. Like that to me is the top.
Gas.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
She's
like
awesome.
when it comes to like Pacific Northwest, you mentioned Northern Lights a second ago. The one that like kind of pre-legalization that really stands out to me, and I don't know if you remember it, but Dutch Treat.
Oh yeah, definitely, dude.
Dutch
Like one of the
Treat
only
was
lemons that I
huge.
like. Oh, dude, stony, electric, loud as fuck, dude. Like
Yes.
lemon on lemon on lemon, right? Like clear, piercing haze. Like, oh yeah,
It definitely,
definitely
yeah,
remember.
yeah, it really reminded me of Hayes, and that, yeah, that was stuff was super loud, and that stuff was always what I got the most money for.
Yeah,
Um, but it reminds me because you mentioned, the sours, the chems, those things are just so loud. And the Dutch Treat was like a Pacific Northwest staple for a while. I think it almost kind of
yep,
blue dreamed itself pre Blue
yep,
Dream. It just was everywhere, and then nobody wants it.
everywhere. Yeah,
And now, like, I have 15-year-old beans, but none of them are popping of it. So, like, I don't even know because the Jordan of the Island from up north, and I think it was Victoria, Canada, but he was the one that put it out, and yeah, dude, I missed that one. But it's loud,
yeah.
like yours.
Super, super crisp lemon, not the Meyer lemon or the dirty lemons that you
Hmm.
see out there. And a lot of that, like, I worked for Subcool for almost 4 years. I saw a lot of lemon and orange and grape and cherry. And so when I ended up leaving that outfit and I started getting heavier into gas, that's where my whole world took off. And funny enough, one of my favorite cuts still to this day was the first cut I was ever given in 2010. It's what we call Seattle Sour Kush. It's Chem 4 headband.
Wow.
It's similar to Chem 91, right? The
Okay.
headband brings that sourness of the Chem 4, and the texture of Chem 91 and Chem 4 when they're finished are really close. But the gas, dude, is I love it so much, and
Your mouth is
when
probably
you're young,
watering, right?
what's that?
I said your mouth is probably watering, right? You had that look of that I get when I'm just like, oh,
Dude, I
hey, I
smoked some
remember that.
Seattle Sour Kush last night, and it was funny because I'll get to the garden, I'll walk through the veg and the bloom real quick and just see what I got to do, and then I'll go roll a spliff. And I rolled up a spliff of Seattle Sour Kush. I forgot I had a couple branches back in the drying room, and I was just like, "Oh, yippee!" Rolled it up like I always do, light it up, put it on the ashtray, give it about 30 seconds to get the ember proper. Because some people light a joint and just start smoking it. Light it up, let it sit, let it gain its cherry. Because if you just start ripping on it, it's gonna run or be hot or whatever else. And so I like set it down, walk into the bloom room, assess what I need to make for water, and I come back and I take the first hit and I'm like, oh God, that's Seattle sour. Like I'd already forgotten. And it was just, dude, the Seattle sour kush is so fire. It is just so good. And that gas is amazing. But we didn't get gas until I never saw chem until like 2000, maybe 2000 like 3. And it was a buddy who had gotten something from California and he only had a little bit. But used to see a lot of Dutch Treat and Pez, dude. Pez was
Okay.
super popular and like right when I graduated in 98 and up until about 2004, we saw Pez all the time. And like Dutch Treat, like I didn't smoke blunts, but a couple of my buddies did. And you could roll up Pez or Dutch Treat in a blunt and still completely taste it, even over like a Lime Optima or a Grape Swisher. Like you could taste the weed over the tobacco wrap. And I was like, wow, and so, um, and flavor is really like a big part of it, and I think as we get more established, we seem to go more towards the myrcene and the gas, where when you're new to cannabis, it's like, you want to roll 50 flavors together and get the effect of 50 different strains at once. And that's back in the day when we had the 4-foot bong attached to the 3-foot hose that went to the gas mask, and you would sit there and obliterate a gram and just sit there fucked up on the couch like, oh, this is so great. And now I'm older, I got a kid, and I'm married and garden and trying to run a business, and sometimes I just want to smoke a little bit and taste it and get back to work. So
different uses. There's different maturity levels of the consumers, and there's the different flavors of the consumers too. And it
Yep.
seems, again, like the fruitier stuff, the floral stuff, it's more accessible, it's more palate pleasing,
Yep.
it's more familiar to taste other people have experienced. But when you
Right.
go to the older heads, it's usually going down that gas, that sour, that funky, the chemically type of
Yep.
smell. It's just a natural progression for a lot of people, and it's absurd some of the descriptions that get us excited, whereas other people would just be like, the hell are you guys talking about?
Dude,
Lemon, though.
it's like,
Lemon.
yeah.
The most lemon, my reference point for lemon, and you mentioned Subcool here, is the Jack's Cleaner 2 from TGA
Oh yeah.
Genetics. Picked it up in 2010 or 2011 from one of the medical dispensaries in the state because I actually had a card. And I always say that was my first like pro genetics. Up until then, it's kind of like bag seeds or whatever. But those were my first pro genetics. Yeah, that Jack Cleaner 2 still to this day is my bar for lemon. It would eat the rubber rings in the top of my ball jars. Like it was
Yeah,
just
100%,
fantastic.
dude. And that was a really unique, old school, hazy, huge yielding, just knuckling flower. And Sub loved the cleaner, man. He was all about that stuff. And it's funny too, because when I first heard about Subcools in 2006, when I'd gone to the DNA coffee shop, gray area, and I'm like, where is the seed shop? And he's like, oh, it's down the street. And so I find it and I go in and talk to Don and Aaron, which a lot of people don't know DNA genetics is Don and Aaron, which is, just kind of a play on words as well as
It's
something cool.
clever.
But I get there and they've got the German and the Dutch catalogs and the Spanish catalogs, and then I see the English catalog. I'm like, oh, cool. Can I take this? They're like, yeah, take a couple.
Hell yeah.
And so I'm like looking through the book, and then you get to the back where it's the Reserva Privata section, and there's Apollo 11, Apollo 13, and both of them are pictured by Subcool, and I'm like, who's Subcool? And then I see him in Skunk Magazine writing articles. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this guy's a columnist. He's really cool. He got good information. And then I found out in like 2009 about seeds and people that were like breeders, if you will. And I literally met Subcool like not even a year after that, but
Wow.
oh, my brain's gonna hit a block here. Oh yeah, so I found all of a sudden that he like makes seeds and he grows a bunch of weed, and I was like, oh, he's not just a columnist, And then I see his
Right.
YouTubes, and he's got the cleaners and the kabooms and the JTR stuff just starting up, and it was a wild world to see all that, and I learned a lot really quickly because I went from being a guy that started growing. I had like 2 rounds under my belt, maybe. And then,
Mhm.
you know how it was back in the Seattle days, you'd have to go to Craigslist to find the dispensaries and what they had. That was like literally the only place you could advertise. And I saw this dude selling TGA seeds on Craigslist, and it was jinx proof. And I'm like,
Okay.
this
Yep.
can't be real because I've been smuggling seeds back from Amsterdam in 2006, 2008, 2010.
Totally.
And
And
I'll
that.
just tell that story real quick. So I meet a dude in Amsterdam in 2006. We're on the beach, and he's rolling all these little hash balls. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm just, this is how I get them home. And I'm like, I don't want to know about this. He's like, they don't go anywhere they shouldn't be. I'm like, okay, cool, because I'm worried. And I was like, so do you know how to like move stuff? And he's like, yeah, for sure. And I'm like, well, I want to take seeds home. He hands me this little marble, glass marble. And he's like, put it in your upper lip and wear it there every day until you leave. I'm like, really? He's like, it'll slowly create a little depression and it will bounce right back after you stop doing it. But he's like, In Europe, they, instead of like a white or a clear or a brown type grocery plastic bag, they have orange, red, and pink. And he's like, if you take the orange one and wrap the seeds up, and then you take the pink one and wrap the seeds up and cut it tight, you can stick it up there and it'll look like your gum line. And yeah, I remember coming back to customs in Philly, and I'm wearing like this American flag T-shirt. I've got my hiking backpack on. I've got my little backpack and my guitar, my long ass hair, and
Hippie.
the dude at the there's like a couple of soldiers, and the guy looks me right in the eyes. He's like, "You're good. Go ahead." So I'm like walking through. I'm not even gonna have to go through customs at this point. And this one dude that's over like checking people, like, you with the guitar and the long hair, he like points me out. I'm like, oh,
Oh
fuck.
shit.
So I like go over there, and he's like asking me to like open my mouth and lift my tongue and check in behind my ears, and never saw that I had seeds up there. And that was how I first started bringing seeds home, dude. And so then I meet Jinx Proof from TGA on Craigslist, link up with him, spend like 700 that day. And I'm like, oh my God, these are like official seed packs, like here in Washington. You know, I was fucking
Yeah.
blown away. And I gave him an ounce of weed that day, and I was like, just answer my phone. I'm good. I'll always come with cash. I'll always come correct. Like, just answer my phone. Here's a free ounce of weed. And that's where that whole thing started. So before being Mr. Spliff, I was just this dude named Mike that had two couple rounds under his belt. My weed was good. At least I thought so. But you
Yeah.
know, then all of a sudden, like a couple months later, I meet Subcool, and
Yeah.
Mr. Spliff was born. It was really rapid, dude. You know, and in my personal case, all of a sudden I was like, you know, on Subcool's YouTubes and going to events and being praised by Sub. And you either walk the walk at that point and act like you were meant to be there, or you stumble and step and people are like, oh, you're not quite ready yet. So I
Yep.
had to like act the part right away. And over time my experience caught up with my status, I guess. And so I've seen an interesting cross section of what it means to be a consumer and a gardener, and I've grown a lot of flavors. I'll tell you that. You know, YouTube back in the day was busy. I was kind of like I was growing out 40 strains at the time, cycling them, but I
Damn.
was growing tons of TGA stuff right when I started working for Sub. And he's like, it's great. You know, I do the Daily Show, and people can go and see all your stuff, and like reviewing Kush and Rip Bubba and Chernobyl and Jack the Ripper and Crazy Train and Ace of Spades and Plushberry and, you know, Time Wreck. And dude, I was growing it. I was a kid in a candy store, you know, like I just
I
got into
bet.
gardening. Then I meet a guy that's got legit seeds, and like they bring me
Yeah.
under their wing, and poof. So,
That's
you know, I was very lucky, very fortunate that my story ended up the way it is.
it's
So,
wild. I always
yeah.
I always say I'm either, like 10 years ahead or 10 years behind. And when I really got into it again, that 2010, 2011 era, that is when I discovered like Subcool. And I learned a lot from him. I've never met him
Mhm.
personally. I could have, but we're so different type personalities. I'm more of a like, I sit back and watch stuff. He is, the
Yeah.
man to talk. So I just watch him and let him do his thing. But when it comes to flavors and when it comes to terpenes and the interactions and the medicinal properties, yeah, listening to Subcool is where I learned a lot or got my launching pad to go and discover more. And it was and
Uh-huh.
where that, I'm either ahead or behind the times comes into play is, this is 15 years ago. And really, all of the stuff he was doing is exactly what the people want today, which is kind of
Dude,
crazy.
agreed. Yep. Yep. So yesterday I was going through a bunch of old Subcool videos trying to find clips because I'm in a bunch of different videos. And so I'm sitting there like watching him garden and talk about his stuff. And like Sub is definitely like that cool kid when he's in public. Like he can talk and play the part so well, you know, and I
Yeah.
learned a lot from him about being Mr. Spliff, right? Like having to bring that persona to the cups and the events and giving people what they came for. But he told me all the time, he's like, dude, I'm just a dork that loves weed, that knows how to put on the showmanship. But when you watch his videos and he's in the garden, and Sub's that guy. There's so many videos of him gardening, sitting cross-legged, just intimate with the plants, like a little kid planting his stuff, all excited about it. And
Right.
I don't think he
True.
ever lost that fascination, which made him one of those breeders that you could feel commonality with, right? Because some of the other
Yeah.
stuff, it's kind of this high society mentality, and it's very
Yeah.
cryptic and hidden. And I know why, but at the same time, Sub was a very relatable guy, and he was always so excited about everything. Like, even when we started hanging out, I went to his house. I don't remember what year it was. Jinx Proof and I went down to visit him and see a bunch of the locals and stuff. And um Sub was showing me his new breeds and showing me his garden, and he was as excited as like a first time grower. And that for me was like super inspiring, just to see somebody that, I mean, this guy used to travel to Amsterdam with seed stock and go to these events where there was maybe 15 tables, and the high times events were,
Wow.
there was law enforcement there.
Oh God, yeah.
Everybody was
For
being
the
watched, and so they went
plants,
through that
right?
time that was way more pressure than what we deal with today. In fact, I made a video about it the other day, that we got to show love to the guys that went before us, because we have no idea how many times their heart beat out of their chest and they were looking over their shoulder. But
Yeah.
to see somebody like Sub that was as passionate and making the videos, and that's a lot of work, I mean, it was brand
Yeah.
affiliation and promotion, but still, in say 2008 to 2014, when he was super huge on the videos, editing programs weren't just commonplace for people that didn't know computers, right? Like, Sub always told me, he's like, "Oh, it's a bitch. I'll go and put a video together, and then I got to watch the whole thing, right? Because I got to make sure that I'm not saying certain things or revealing a name, or then I put two things out of order and they're no longer in context, and so I had to go back and fix it." And but watching his videos yesterday, hearing his voice, and because Sub and I were really close, and it's weird when there's loss like that. Like, I cried my tears when he first passed, and there's times that I definitely sit and reminisce. But it's crazy to think of somebody that was so magnetic and um, such a big part of the early American industry unfolding publicly. He was a huge figure, and
Yeah.
a lot of people identified with that kind of just happy, excited, enthusiastic type stance on cannabis. And he definitely displayed it well. And I mean, shit, there's like 350 Weed Nerd episodes. It's crazy, And if you watched as far back as when it originally was called The Daily Show, um,
Mhm.
Sub was a rad dude. He was a dude's dude. He seemed kind of like
Yeah.
a jockey type dude. And then, like, at the cups, he was. As soon as the cup was over, he was back to being Sub, just normal dude. And but he was an enigma, man. Sub was really something else. And I'm really glad we got to spend as much time together as we did. And again, it like fell into my lap. I mean, mind you, I did get on Craigslist and was looking for clones, and I'd bought some clones and seeds that ended up being just garbage. Then I saw Jinx Proof with what was originally called Pink Lady Kush, that then got changed to
Hmm.
Plushberry. And
Okay.
I was like, "You got seeds?" And he was like, "Oh, I got seeds." And so I ended up going and scooping a bunch of seeds, Cheesequake being some of them. Grew out the
Nice.
Cheesequake. Uh, I chopped it a month and a half before the first School of Dank, and
Okay.
had it all jarred up. Get to the School of Dank. I'd put a little bit of money in for sponsorship, like 500, and for me at the time it was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get to the School of Dank, and I'm like, "Hey, Jinx Proof, let me help set up." Like, I'd helped him work on his house and do stuff because I'm a carpenter and I always love to lend my services, and just a helpful dude in general. Like, I like to do my part in work. And I show up and I'm like, "Hey, let me help you set up chairs." He's like, "Nope, you've already done enough." He's like, "Go upstairs. There's this amazing deck that overlooks the entire Soto district. There's a
Wow.
there's a roof over the deck. There's a giant wall with fireplace in it, and these huge couches right next to the fireplace. The place is called Within Soto, an amazing place to throw an event. It's got two main rooms with a stage room and full sound system, kitchens." But so I'm sitting up there with my buddy from Germany, and uh and this is a dude that I've like been to Amsterdam with that, introduced me a bunch of gardeners in Germany. So we're upstairs sitting there and I've got, my little tote full of jars and we're sitting there smoking a joint and here comes Subcool and Jilly. And Subcool's got the full on trench coat, battle shirts on, green hat, purple glasses, long hair, just looking like Subcool, and he walks up to me and he looks at me and he's like, "You mind if I sit next to you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be fine." So he sits next to me.
Sure.
Jilly sits in the corner, like in the corner of the couch. And as soon as Sub's going to sit down, I hand him a jar of cheesequake. And he's like, "Wow." He's like, "I haven't even sat down yet." And he's opening it as he sits down. He sits his nose in it. He's like, "Oh my God." It's like, "I just got to Seattle for the first time. And before I can even sit down, you're handing me a jar of Absolute Fire." He's like, "What is this?" I was like, "It's some of your stuff." And he's like, "Really?" I was like, "It's the first TGA strain I ever grew out." And
Man,
he's like smelling it. And he's like, "It smells like cheesequake." I was like, it is." And it was this dark purple, just cheesy, grapey, funky fire, dude. And like,
damn,
boom, that's how
damn.
I accelerated right there. He's like, "So, by the end of the night," he's like, "You're a part of TGA and I really want you to work with us." And I was like, yeah." So
Totally. You passed the vibe check. You got good
exactly,
weed.
dude. We sat there and talked about, music and weed and chicks and just dude stuff, and he's like, "You're rad." And I was like, "Hey, yes, I am." Like I didn't know what to say. And so and at that point, I'd been growing for about a year and a half. He was super impressed with my flower. And mind you, what we were impressed by in 2010 probably wouldn't fit the bill today as far as just small gardeners. We were just stoked to be able to create anything that was clean and covered in resin and had smell.
Right.
And yeah, it's been a long road, and I keep going back to those times in my youth when we'd get a dub sack and go stand out in the little wooded area and smoke out with our little radio and hang out and laughing our asses off, and like Goonies type shit where we were all those
Oh
kind of
yeah.
close friends. And so it's
Well,
different
that's
these
but it.
days. A lot of people are consuming in a way that's not social. And
Mhm.
and since I'm bringing that up, I don't know if you ever met Jeff Steinborn, local lawyer here in Washington, always at Hempfest, huge part of
Mhm.
writing the bills and stuff. And he always told me, "Don't call it recreational use because then the authorities will think we're having fun. Call it social use." And I was like, "Got it."
Yeah, adult use. A
So
lot of times, I'll go with adult use. Makes
yeah,
makes a good point, because yeah, recreational, and it's weird sometimes when I get the question of what's the difference between recreational and medical weed? It's the same damn thing. It's just how you kind
same
of
damn
use it.
thing. Just
But the
dude,
the thing yeah, the thing that really stuck out to me about Subcool, and I think why, he resonated with a lot of different people, and that's awesome that you had that experience because I'm sure you undoubtedly gained a lot of wisdom that it takes us decades to figure out. But he to me struck me as the type of guy who would be doing it if nobody was freaking watching. And that
yeah,
for me is always where I've had my greatest success in life. It's when like I'm going to be this geeky about it. I'm going to be this like into it, whether anybody's looking or not, whether it was, I've done music, I've done skateboarding, and now, I mean, music, skateboarding, and cannabis have always been there in my life. But as I get older, different, I can't skate the same way I used to. So then music, and now that life is just, I can't do that anymore. So now I'm just
yeah,
like, all right, guys,
yeah,
it's all,
yeah,
all canna. But he again that passion, he was really doing it before there was a quote unquote industry. Yeah, the black
yep,
market prices were great, but there wasn't the fame or all of this stuff that today people who maybe classified as like soulless, uh different
yep,
different reasons, completely
yeah.
different reasons. People get into it to be cool, and they could be great growers, they could be great breeders, but sometimes it goes all back down to that core value of why are you even doing this? And
I
I think Sub was in there.
100%. When you see like, I love hip hop, but when you integrate the modern
Mhm.
hip hop culture and cannabis together, it just becomes this hype train,
Yeah, oh
and
yeah. That is the
I think,
culture hype.
yeah, dude, for sure. I mean, nothing against the Cookies brand, but like that whole persona of standing out front with this plastic leaf blower mechanism and putting smalls in there and blowing weed smoke all over people. And,
Yeah,
I mean, I get it and I don't, but cannabis is one of those things I think that also is probably way more controlled than we would think. And so the culture is driven by the money that's behind it, and
yeah, yeah.
um,
Good point.
cannabis is a very unique thing, though, too. I think as far as just trying to regulate our own lives, cannabis is something that it gives you back gardening what you put in. And it
Yeah,
is a true
absolutely.
reflection of the time you spent and your preparation and cultivating. There's a lot of obstacles and variables, right? And that's something Sub used to tell me all the time. He's like, when life is chaotic, my garden sucks. But when I'm focused and I'm not letting everything else interfere, then my garden is good and it becomes a sanctuary. And funny enough, I didn't learn a lot of gardening techniques from Sub. The one thing I'll never forget that he taught me is when I was cloning. He's like, the most imperative thing is when you're seeding a clone into medium, or especially if you're not using a arrow clone, or if you're using plugs or Rockwool or a medium, it's like,
Mhm.
do not compress the clone when you're putting it in. If it crumples at all, if that tissue reaches some kind of stopping point and you're pushing it and it starts to fold like an accordion, clone's going to die. And at the time, I was getting like 60% on my trays. And then once I started kind of paying attention to that, I was getting 100%. And I was like, wow, little things. I remember watching a video of
Yeah.
Soma way back when I first started, and he's like, "You've got to take your cuts and put them in a cup of water so it burps. The embolism will cause the clone to die." And I'm like, here's this old dude that's obviously been doing it for a long time, sitting in Amsterdam making this little video, and I stumble upon it, and I'm like, oh. So there's little things that we pick up through the years, and a lot of it is passed down by the elders, and here we are in an industry where everybody's like, one of my least favorite hashtags is "fuck your bag" or "it's not in your bag." I want
Let's,
everybody to have fire.
let's put our
It's
dicks
just
out on the
weird.
table, why don't we? Yeah.
Exactly that, and it's like, so I think that's part of the modern culture is it's become kind of this like Starbelly Sneetches type situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Son of a
Well,
bitch.
it goes back to the motivation of why people are consuming it, why people are being part of the grow or the breeding. It's like, and it is possible for both to exist. You can be medicinally focused with a retail mindset, but
Right.
more often than not, the scale is tipped to the retail consumer mindset, and that's not the
Yep.
medicinal side. And another thing that
Without a
just
doubt.
sucks, it's like, like Oaksterdam and Harborside, they were great. Again, medical was the Trojan horse. People ditched the med patients once everything became legal. And the
Yep.
reason why is because sick people don't have money. They're too busy paying
100%.
doctor bills. And that pisses
Yep.
me off.
Yep.
But oh,
Well,
that's all. Yeah.
with the medical thing, I can remember in Seattle when it first started coming online, and there were multiple gardens in Seattle that had brought their medical equipment to their recreational sites.
Hmm.
And I knew some people that were involved in the inspection side of things. Like there was a guy that I went to school with. I don't remember what industry he was in, but he was really good at just evaluating, somebody's business and seeing what they're using and what they weren't. And come to
Yeah.
find out that there were three major brands that were caught with Eagle 20
He,
and Merit and things like that in their rec grows, which were completely not allowed. And their fucking excuse was, oh, we were using that in the medical days and now we're transitioning to recreational. When you spray a flowering plant with Eagle 20 and you combust it, it turns into formaldehyde.
yeah.
And these guys were spraying their rooms with Eagle 20 in flower and selling it at dispos. And people would get the gnarliest headaches. And I can remember a friend of mine, this just before rec came online, and he was he worked for how do I say it without exposing what he does? They make cannabis room controllers, and
Okay.
he'd come to town, and he knew some guys from one of those brands, and they gave him a bunch of like the pre-rolled that come in like a Virginia Slims looking pack. And he's like, dude, I got to smoke 2 of these at a time to get stoned, and then after that, I've got the worst headache. And I'm like, the medical days, right? Where it's a free for all, dude. It was a literal
Yeah.
free for all. I knew guys that were running 200 lights, and they had
Yeah.
hundreds of uh what would you call it? People's med card paper printouts. They'd
That
go
they
to
just stacked,
dispensaries.
stack the
Yeah.
prescriptions.
Well, they would go to dispensaries that they sold weed to, and they'd offer them 10 grand for 100 licenses.
Oh, damn.
And those patients never knew that their information was being given to somebody else, and that they were now tied to that group of people doing what they were doing. And I don't think the patient was at any risk of legal issues, but I saw that shit happen all the time, dude. And I'm just like thinking to myself, so there was a lot of people bending the rules, and I don't think that those bends have stopped in recreational, but I think that there's definitely a concern for educating the citizenship to what is good, what's clean, what's not, and what to look
Mhm.
for. And so it's just this money chase right now, and this clout chase. And where does it all end? Does it ever, like, are we ever concerned about the consumer and that education? And once we decriminalize, like we were saying earlier, a lot of that can come forward, and people can spend money on producing those studies and things that would give us a better insight. And I think it's something we all need desperately. Because, like you said, there's like when I take dabs, I'm a cold start guy, because I feel like if I start to combust the hash too much and it's creating this thick smoke, that I'm probably taking this oil substance that's reached its flash point. It's like if you're cooking with butter or oil in a pan, there's that point where it starts to smoke, and you don't
Yep.
want to hit that point. So we got a lot to learn, and it's crazy to come up when we did, when again we were searching for the bag when we were young, and now worst case scenario, you go get some dabs. So
Get free dabs at the event, right? You almost like trip on it these days sometimes. I do if I when I go to an event, it's like I do not need to ever buy anything or bring anything. It's like I give stuff away. I come home with stuff. It's such an insane thing going back to the days where
yeah,
it's like you would spend hours calling,
dude.
texting different people for that 10 sec. Meet me down at the reservoir.
Yeah, dude. Oh man. Reminiscent about the cups, like how many times from 2010 to 2016 at a High Times Cup did you hear people shouting top shelf nug run, top shelf nug run, top shelf nug run? And you're like, how do I know? And then oh man, let me take the glasses off for this one. Then we start hearing all these little Wookiee kids talking about, oh bro, I got cup cough. And I'm like,
What
you got
clue?
what? And they're like, yeah, I got cup cough. And I'm like, what is that? They're like, oh, that's where you get sick from, smoking all the stuff at the cup. And I'm like, is that because like you were up pressing your lips against something that somebody else had just smoked off and you weren't cleaning it? Like Sub was crazy. He had the alcohol wipes every single time somebody hit his pipe for the next person to hit it,
Nice.
because he would give out hits of hash. And then with cup cough, I don't, dude, do you remember the little silicone things that they would make that you could stick in a bong and then hit it?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it was a lanyard. They
Yes.
looked like, I hate to say
Buckle
it,
it.
but they looked like little silicone butt pluggy things. And like, they were giving them out as part of the thing to keep people safe. And you could put it up to a dab rig, put it up to a joint, and all these young kids attending High Times all had these colorful little silicone things, and they never used them. And then they were
Yeah.
getting cup cough. And I just remember thinking, like, oh God, cup cough. It's just, and people giving out dabs, like you were saying at the events, you'd leave there toasted. If you were a person that bought a ticket and went to the show, you didn't need to have money. You just need to pretend like you were going to buy something, and
Just walk up.
smoke 4 grams of hash and leave. So,
Were you
yeah.
at the 2014 High Times Cup? It was when it was in Everett. It was at the
Oh
arena
yeah.
there, but last
When it
minute
was
they said you
broken up.
can't smoke. So they had the
Yeah.
parking lot across the street for smoking. That was really my introduction to dabs. And a buddy from Colorado had a booth and a hookah, and he was like giving them out. But yeah, when you mentioned the sterilization, I'm going back to that time versus like the most recent event I went to where, yeah, it was sterilized between,
Yep.
everybody. They changed the water every so often. Like
Yep.
flashing back to those days, it was like, whatever, let me lick a
Dude.
doorknob.
100%. You might as well be making out with everybody at the fucking cup at that point because it's just, oh my gosh, dude. But the industry in its infancy, and I clearly remember that High Times event because for people that have been to a High Times event, usually it's a parking lot party. There's, a cordoned off area with fences and everything's within that area. This particular High Times was at an event center, and it was on the outside of the event center. So where I was with Gage Green, we were out back of the loading dock. Then you could go across the street, and that's where there was more seed companies like Exotic and Kaya and God, what were those guys called? Rascal Seeds and all these different people were
Wish
out
I would
there.
have
And
got some.
what was the God, across the street? Trying to
There
Do you
was
remember the Cavi Cone booth that year?
the
It was a
two-story, my
two-story.
speakers are turned up all the way and I keep screaming all fucking day long. No, don't remember that booth at all.
Dude, my buddy chopped their speaker lines with a little axe that one of the guys that
Thank
worked at the
you.
event gave him. Dude,
Thank
and
you.
what was so funny, they're like throwing out these cavi cones. And for what people don't know, a caviar cone, right? It's really shitty weed with black distillate inside. And so people were smoking them by the booth and it smelled terrible. So we grabbed, dude, they're all over the ground. There's joints all over the ground. People are walking on them. People are like, "Oh, joint," picking it up and smoking it after it's been
Oh
stepped on and
God.
probably had some yuck spilled on it. But we start opening them up, and it's like brown weed with just nasty dark BHO in it, and who knows what else. And these guys have spent 20 or 30 grand on their booth, and they've got speakers blaring, and there's these dudes on the second story thinking they're gods, and I'm like, oh my
Yeah,
lord,
exactly.
And then you had to walk out and around and up the street and to the back side of the building, and that's where Crockett was, and there was like 7 booths up there. It was the most
Yep.
disorganized event I've ever been to. And I don't know if you went to the one the year before where they had it, um, where the indoor sun shop was in Fremont,
No, I know
but
where that
that
is, but no, I didn't go to that one.
it was really, really small. They had some people inside, like the TGA booth was inside at that time, and
Wow.
there was like 4 or 5 breeders there. Cali Connection was there. Exotic before he ever blew up. Like I
Right?
can remember. I'll have to tell that story someday. It involves Subcool, and it's a good one for another episode. But yeah, the events really changed a lot, and a lot of the cannabis events were not last minute, but because of the legal issues, it was really hard to throw them. And I can remember hearing about Chalice 2015. Inside of a building, middle of summer, power goes out. Everybody paid for power. Everybody's got LCD TVs displaying their product. So power goes down. Nobody can take cards anymore. Can't
Oh,
leave the event or you can't get back in because of legality. One toilet for each men and women. There
no.
was an issue with the toilet in the men's room. And a buddy of mine that worked for an e-nail company, he's like, dude, there was dookie coming out of the toilet like a foot high. Like the whole bowl was filled up and people they couldn't leave the event and they had thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of merchandise and they're not going to walk away from their table and they're like, and people had gotten sick from the food they sold there. And
Oh, Jesus.
dude,
That doesn't help the bathroom situation.
no. And like, I just remember hearing how poorly that event was thrown and how many got shut down halfway through because there wasn't a smoking permit. And in
Mhm.
2013, when we did the LA Cup, the morning of the show, like the show starts at noon on Friday and then 10 a.m. Saturday, Sunday. At like 10:15, Sub calls me. He's like, "We're all going to San Bernardino. They just moved the cup from LA to San Bernardino, which was like an
Right?
hour and 20-minute drive." And so everybody that's staying downtown LA, some of these people are, they flew in, they don't have money for a cab, hour and a half ride. So people are trying to figure out bus schedules and tram schedules, and and it was another parking lot party last minute. And I almost think they were going to do that the whole time. And then the next year it was in San Bernardino because the laws are better, or who knows. But just to watch the forging of the events and how awkward it is. I mean, dude, Hempfest, one of the
Yeah.
best parties ever, really well organized, Um, and I really miss pre-rec Hempfest.
Yes.
It was awesome.
Yeah. And there
On the
was a
water.
there was a big changing of the guard at high times around that time. That's again when it went to the suits
Yep.
instead of the heads.
That's it.
Funny enough, like for people who don't understand, legalization in Washington killed the events because we can no longer get together and gather and smoke. So yeah, I think that 2014 High Times was the last one that I remember.
In Seattle, yeah, for sure.
Yep.
And it's funny too because there's the MedMen controversy in California where these guys are paying lobbyists to outlaw grows, and they were doing the same shit in Washington where all of a sudden
Yeah.
these huge lobbyists were out there, shilling for these big money corporations in cannabis, saying, we don't want to see people selling cannabis artwork or bongs or seeds at Hempfest. It's not okay. They're taking our money away, which was just insane, and that's where a lot of the legal changes came from, was lobbyists lobbied on behalf of big money corporations that might not be their main play, but they're making money in cannabis and they don't want to see it go to the individual citizen. They just want to keep it within their ranks. And it's we're in a spot where that might change soon, and we need more analytics. We need people to be more commonly aware of what does what, how it affects the body, how it affects your emotional levels. And
Yeah.
it's so accelerated these days. And it seems like a lot of the joy surrounding cannabis is almost passed on. And us old heads, if that's what we're at in our late 40s, but we remember a different time, when it was just such a special thing to get good smoke. And now there's so many options, and the market's so saturated, and yet the dispensaries are still charging top dollar. Although,
Yeah.
from what I've seen in Washington, pretty much everybody's got a nonstop 30% off sale. So it's like,
Which coincidentally is the taxes, 30% taxes.
go figure. It's they tax everybody to death. And I know a lot of gardens that they buy other gardens' failed crops and just white label them and sell them dirt cheap because it's more income, and the vertical integration or the lack thereof in Washington definitely affects the market, doesn't it? Can't
It
sell it straight.
does.
Got to have some middle dude. And say you piss off one of the dispos in Washington, well, they're all buddies. They all
Oh,
kind of
a
got each other's
small
backs. But
world.
as soon as you're black labeled as a garden, there is no law stating that anybody has to buy your product.
Right.
So you could basically be put out of business because someone doesn't like you. And in today's modern cancel culture, you say one thing that people don't like, regardless of where that thought process comes from, you could be out of business just like that. And Oregon, you can have your own shop, you can cultivate, you can process, and you can sell it yourself, which why
And
can't
that's
we do
vertical
that?
integration. Yeah, for
Yeah.
people who don't understand it, is in Washington, the grower can't sell it. We have to get it to a distributor. The distributor is the one who brings it to the stores. Vertical integration, what you need, so you can have the grow in the back, the shop, processing in the middle, and the shop up front.
Yep.
Healthy, that's the best way to do it. But there's a reason why nobody quotes Washington when they're looking to expand their legal system or start a legal system, even though we're the oldest, us in Colorado. There's a reason
Yep.
nobody looks or quotes Washington. uh,
Yeah.
yeah, one place, that's kind of, you mentioned it a couple of times, that's kind of going the same way too, is in Amsterdam. Like, its heyday
Yep.
is gone. We go,
Oh, dude,
me and my wife, we
completely.
try to go every year. We're going to go back again next year and stop over in Germany for the Mary Jane in Berlin
Hmm.
Festival.
Hmm.
Um, but you were there, kind of mid 2000s, which was when it was still kind of cool. They still had the high time cups going
Hell
there.
yes.
What was your first like experience with the coffee shops? Like, what was that all about? Was that as having worked both? I worked commercially grow in Washington. I've also worked the retail, and there is definitely a look of when someone walks into a dispensary for their first time. Like,
For
you
sure.
all know it. You can't hide it. There is no poker face that covers that. Were you like that when you exactly when you got to Amsterdam? What was that like?
So the next time you go to Amsterdam, look up a place called Camping Zeeburg. Zeeburg. It's just outside of the city. It's this
Okay.
campground where you can either throw a tent in the field, you can rent one of their wagonettes or their little homes or a cabin. They've got a restaurant, a bar, a kiosk that's got everything you need. They've got like 10 vending machines, half of them are Magnum ice cream. So we started off there, and my buddy had been to Amsterdam 2 years before me, and all I heard was stories of him and his dad getting so fucked up that both of them lost consciousness in the hotel at one point, right? They like just
Ew.
took huge hits and fell down on the floor and, shattered their pieces. And they were like, dude, I was so high, I couldn't see straight. And they had gone to the DNA coffee shop, the gray area, and smoked something called the Mist. And he was like, dude, I was so fucked up. So I go in 2006, and our main purpose was I played soccer my whole life and played for the Sounders farm team. Had I not had surgeries, I probably would have played pro ball. So we want to go see the World Cup in Germany, and one of my only other buddies, and I'm like, hey, do you want to go to Europe? He's like, dude, let's start saving money. So we go and we stop. We start off in London, and we're there for like 3 or 4 days. And my buddy's sister had lived in London, so she knew right where to get weed. So we get on the North Black
Nice.
Line, go to Camden Town, get off the train, and within 10 minutes we got weed. It's fucking awesome. They could see us American boys looking for weed. So we sit there, we
Yeah.
smoke for a while, and we were actually going to fly out of London again. So we bought this glass pipe. We'd been smoking out of it. We put it in 3 Ziplocs. We were in Hyde Park. We find this tree that like has multiple branches. I like dig it out, put the pipe in there, put dirt over it. We'll leave that story for there right now. But so we go to Amsterdam. We get to the beach where we're staying at Camping Zeeburg, which is amazing. The city, if you stay in the city, it's just the city overload for so long, especially when you're young and just want to go smoke weed. And for those that would go with a couple or, with your partner, Amsterdam is one of the most beautiful romantic cities anywhere in the world. Like very
Love it.
quaint, and especially walking around at night with all the bridges over the little waterways and the lights on the bridges, and it's just a totally different world. But so we started off at the Abraxas actually, and that's that day I had my first cup of coffee. So I've been smoking weed my whole life, and I'm in this European city for the first time. Like London's a way different than the Netherlands, right? And the
Mhm.
Netherlands was started by a hippie princess kind of girl that left Frankfurt and Hessen and started this new culture in what's now the Netherlands. So we get to Amsterdam, and it's this beautiful flat city where you can walk everywhere, and there's all these hot chicks on bikes with their umbrella over the front of the bike like a jousting stick. They just ride around, and if you get in the way, you're getting poked because they're so tired of all these tourists, right? So we're walking around the
Dude,
city,
yeah.
and we get out of the train station, and there's this huge city before us, and we walk to Dom Square, and I asked one of the local cops, I was like, hey, I've never been here before. What's a good coffee shop? And he's like, you looking for weed? And I was like, yeah. He's like right around the corner, I think there's one. And it's the Abraxas. And we walk in, and it's like this mushroom type design on the inside. And the second story's got this see-through thing, and we're like, can we sit upstairs? And they're like, yeah. And so we buy some weed, and we go up, and that's the point of like shock for me. I walk up, and they've got this
Mhm.
laminated menu, and there's 20
Yeah.
different varieties. There's 7 varieties of hash. There's some pre-rolls, and I'm just like, well, how convenient. This is 2006. I've never seen a dispensary. Medical's really not online at that point. And like in Seattle in 2006, if you went to a dispensary, it was some house in West Seattle that had some religious exemption, and like you have to go and put your money in the donation plate that's on camera, so it's not
Uh,
like it was just this whole thing. So I go to Amsterdam, and I see this menu, and we get Northern Lights number 5 and some beautiful Moroccan hash, and we roll a joint, and I'm just blown away. And add to that, my buddy and I go, And then my younger brother was 2 years younger than me, and some of his best friends that I've known my whole life are in Amsterdam at the same time. So
Damn.
we all meet up and go to the Abraxas, and because like we find this coffee shop after the cop tells me where to go and get weed because it's a totally different culture there. And I call my buddies. I'm like, hey, dude, let's go to this coffee shop. They meet up with us. We're looking at the menu. We smoke. The first time I ever tried a little cafecito, a little coffee. First time, 26. And we smoked a few joints. We literally were like, dude, we got to get back to the beach, and they got to get to their hotel. It's probably late. We met up at like 2. We
Yeah.
literally thought we had been there for like 5 hours. And we get up to leave, and the waitress is like, leaving so early, and we're like, what do you mean? We've been here forever. And she's like, honey, check your watch. I look down, it's like 3:15. We've been there for like 45 minutes. I
Damn.
was I was
Time
so stoned.
warps.
Yeah, dude. And like when I was young, I had hippie friends that had fungus and herb, and they had hash oils and different things, but nothing ever wrecked me like that, dude. We walked out of there and we're like, shit, we got the whole day left. So my first experience in a coffee shop was crazy. And my first trip in Amsterdam, I think I spent 2,000 euros in a week.
Because you always have to buy a damn drink every time you buy your
Well,
weed in the
that
coffee
and you're
shop.
going to
If you
every
want to sip.
coffee shop. And so we stayed at this beach place that I'm telling you, you've got to go to Camp Zeeburg, dude. The vibe there is fucking awesome. Like it's better to stay in the summer, obviously, than the winter. But so like this is the kind of place where you go into the city, you go and smoke at a coffee shop, you get some food, you buy some weed and hash to go back to the beach. And then it's just this big beach hangout. So you're literally just briefing doobies the whole time. And so we'd make sure we were buying, I mean, we were going through at least an ounce a day, between me and my
Damn.
buddy. And that was considerable smoking back in those days. And you're getting 5 grams
Yeah.
of hash from Barney's farm, and you're going to the Bluebird, you're going to the Rockery, you're going to the Green Door, you're going to Gray Area. You're like, coffee shops everywhere. And like, um, a great story is like the second day we're there, we're like trying to find a new coffee shop, and we're like Googling coffee shops, and we find this one that's just outside of the train station. And we walk in, and it's like all these older Dutch folks at like in a fine dining coffee shop. And
Wow.
when we walk in, we're like looking around, everybody turns and looks at us. Right, we're two American kids standing there, and we're like, oh. And the
Shit.
guy comes up and he's like, would you like a table, or would you like to look at the menu? And I was like, yeah. And he like with a look of disgust hands me this menu, and I start to read it, and he's like, there's no weed on there. This is not that kind of coffee shop. And I was like, oh. And so and then
Snap.
he like literally points to the door with his hand. He's like, please leave. I look at all the people in this fine dining coffee shop, and there's like the 30 or 40 people in there. They're looking at me like, get the fuck out of here. So we
Oh,
leave, and we're totally ashamed. And there's this dude outside. I don't know if he's homeless or just guy that, does his thing in the area. He starts laughing, and we're like, what? He's like, he thought it was a coffee shop, huh? I was like, yeah. He's like, no, that's like a high-end dining area. And like, they were probably really annoyed that you disturbed them. And so, oh man.
that's awesome, man. Well, because it's a coffee shop and then coffee house. There's a little bit of a difference.
Especially when you can't read the local language, and
No.
we spent a lot of time there. I mean, we would always go back, so we would buy what's called a Eurail pass. So for 2 grand, you had 60 days of uninterrupted travel in the
Lucky.
Western 20 countries. And if you wanted to ride first class, it was like €3 to make a reservation. But you could just get on a train and ride with your rail pass. And so we would go in 2006. We met these dudes in Amsterdam on the beach. They were because there's like 150 people there generally at one time.
Yeah.
And these dudes that were camping right next to us were German dudes from Frankfurt. And not only did they speak perfect English, but they listened to all American hip hop. So we
Okay.
completely, I didn't have to translate anything, and it was such a relief. And we were going to go to a city in Germany to watch the World Cup. They're like, fuck that, come to Frankfurt. We've got like the setup you don't even know. And it's like this hostel right on the river. In the river, they got 2 jumbotrons with a screen on each side with bleachers set up on side so people can
Damn.
come there and watch the games, the World Cup. Well, like
Damn.
a couple of days into the the trip, we realized there's like no fucking weed in the city. And I'm asking my buddy, I'm like, you guys don't like smoke weed? He's like, everybody smokes weed. It's just that the World Cup's here and everybody's bought everything up, right? They're like holding on to it for the cup. And we're like sitting here scratching our heads, like, well, what the fuck are we gonna do? And we've been hanging out at, so right behind our hostel was like all these little restaurants, and there's this little sports betting place, and it's like, it's a weird little thing. There's all these dudes there that definitely seem like criminals, and so I'm like, these are my kind of people. So like we go there and we're betting on games and stuff, and I start talking to the one guy who I know is a career criminal, like, you know, not a bad guy, but the guy that fucked around and did his thing and didn't get caught. And so I'm like, so say an American guy wanted to go to Amsterdam and bring a whole bunch of weed back. He's like, I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, the borders are closed right now because of the World Cup. They're generally open, but they've got cops stationed at every border. And I was like, well, I need to make this happen. And he's like, all right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go rent the fanciest car you can from this particular rental company. You're going to take all the rental stickers off the car, put them in the glove box so you can put them on when you get back to Germany. You're going to get gas halfway to Amsterdam, and then you're going to drive all the way to the city. He's like, you're going to do your thing and you're going to fill the tank fully in Amsterdam, and then you do not stop until you get to Frankfurt. It's like a 4-hour drive and just enough tank to get there. And we saw the police stations like in Maastricht, and that's like the first Dutch city inside the German border. And then the couple of German cities right there. There's like hundreds of like military cops with checkpoints and stuff. And it's only if you get off at the rest stops. So we go with like 1,500 euro, and we bought as much weed as we could. We told all the guys there too what we were doing. We're like, no, dude, we went to Frankfurt and there's no weed. So we're like coming here to buy as much as we can and take it back. And at the time, we didn't have back seal. We had the Ziploc bags that you could put the little pumper on with the little circle. And so we were super gluing the zip part and then pumping it up and then putting a layer of super glue over that so it would hold it. And it did. And we must have had, dude, we had 1,500 euros. So we probably had a little over a half pound and like a couple ounces of hash. Not only that, we packaged every one of them and labeled it. And then we wrote everything down on a menu and laminated that when we got to Germany. So like we told people like, hey, we're gonna go, we'll be back in a couple of days. And everybody's like, what do you mean? We're like, we're going to get weed. And they're like, the fuck are you talking about? You guys aren't from Europe. And I'm like, we got the American hustle player, you don't know. So we leave, we turn around and come back the next day, and we hit my buddy up and I'm like, hey dude, what are you doing? And it's the guys that we met in Amsterdam. And they're like, just chilling at the house. I thought you guys were going on a trip. And we're like, yeah, we did. And they're like totally confused. I'm like, hey, can I come over to your house real quick? And he's like, yeah, sure. We're looking for some herb. I said, sweet, I need some too. So we show up to his house, and we left a little bit, like we have a really secure room at the hostel because our buddies' friends work there, and it comes with a safe, which was really nice. So we show up to my buddy's house, and we know they're looking for weed, and we come and sit on the couch, and they're just kind of like frustrated, you know. And we're like, do you guys want to smoke? We got a little bit. And they're like, really? Is it good? I was like, it's awesome. It was pink bubble gum. So we put like an eighth on the table, and they're like, oh my God, who the fuck did you get this from? And we're like, we know a guy, you know. And they're like, can you get more? And I was like, yeah, he's got a couple different kinds actually. And so we hand him our fucking laminated menu that's got every fucking thing you can imagine. And then the backside is all these different hashes. There's like 7 different kinds of hash, and we probably bought like, I want to say there was probably close to 2 ounces of hash. And by the way, the Dutch guys gave us a great fucking deal when they knew what we were doing. We're like, yeah, we just rented a car from Six, then we got this Audi, and we're like doing a 24-hour turnaround. They're like, you guys are idiots. We're like, we're going to be just fine. So we get back to the city, and this guy's like sees our menu. And we've got at the very top says 5 gram limit per person, 2 gram limit per person on hash and stuff. And dude, the city is out at this time. There is no motherfucking weed anywhere.
Damn.
And so there's this park on the backside of this hospital. It's a private park. The police cannot enter unless there's like a situation where there's a fight or something worse. But so it's like the hippie hangout, right? And so we're at this park, and our buddy called a couple of friends and said, like, you should come to the park. The American guys just did something legendary. So these people start funneling into the park, right? And it's over, 5 or 6 hours, but they come and sit down with us and they immediately, like, they're like, our American friends have weed. These people show up and they're like, you guys got weed? And we're like, oh, fuck yeah. And they're like, what do you got? And we hand them the menu. And they're like looking at the menu, and it was 20 euros per gram, no wiggle room, 5 gram
Okay.
max per person. And like once we got to the end, we had a little bit left, we'd give people a little bit more. But, um, the cup was going to start in like 2 days. And people were just like, holy shit, you've got a menu. I was like, yeah, it's all Dutch weed and Dutch hash. And
So fun.
they're blown away. And what's
Yeah.
funny is, the word got around. And one day, the dude that I told you from the sports betting place that told me how to rent the car, he's kind of like a local gangster. They know who the fuck he is. So he comes walking to the park one day looking for me. And I'm sitting with all these university kids and we're smoking. And like, as soon as he shows up, the circle gets quiet, right? And they're like, oh, dude, there's Ramon or whatever his name was.
Uh-oh.
And he
Right.
sees me and he like waves and I wave back and they're like, you know him? I was like, yeah, he at the sports betting place behind the hostel. They're like, and you guys are like friendly? I was like, yeah, for sure. He's the one that like, taught me how to get the car and stuff. So he comes over and he sits, he's like, hey, can I sit with you guys? And everybody's like kind of like not starstruck, but they know who he is. And they're like, yeah,
Yeah.
please. And he's like, do you have weed? And I was like, yes, I do. And he's like, can I get a little bit? And I hand him the menu and he looks at the menu and he's like, no fucking way. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, there's no way. And I was like, yeah, you can get a gram of each or 5 grams of this and that. I was like, but flip it over. And he flips it over and sees the hash. And he's just like, this is insane. And he sees the thing. He's like, 5 grams per person. He's like, but if my friends want to get 5 grams, I was like, totally cool. We got enough. So all of a sudden, we're like these legendary Americans in the German city of Frankfurt
Yeah.
right before the cup because we risked the biscuit, drove to Amsterdam, dropped 1,500 euros, packaged it all. Then we're at my buddy's house
Man.
for hours, putting them into little gram baggies because they got weed shops all over the place. And the German dude's like, I'm like, can I get 500 of those small bags? And the dude like looks at me and he's like, you're not from here. Why the fuck do you need them? I was like, bro, I'm a businessman. Can I just get the fucking bags? And like
Exactly. Don't ask.
ri- risky as fuck though. But after that, dude, we were like legends in the city. So when I went back in 2008 and 2010, I had keys to people's houses, knew 150 people, and like it was one of the most legendary things I've ever done in my life as far as just being in a
Yeah.
foreign country, renting a car, risking imprisonment just to bring the dochi to the people. And um it was an amazing time, dude. Like having the proximity of Amsterdam right there is like we're looking at we're like it's only 4 hours away, and we drove like from Washington or from Seattle to Spokane all the time anyway.
Very American point of view.
Yeah, 100%, because my German buddies are like, everybody has a car in America. I'm like, yeah. And so he came to stay with me one time. He's like, man, everything's so far away. I was like, yeah, this is a big motherfucking country. You guys got about as many people in that little box that we do on this whole giant continent. And so for us to take a quick road trip, I mean, shit, I've driven to Othello to get weed, back when I was younger,
Exactly.
right? Like, so this was just one of
Exactly.
those natural things where all of a sudden we're like, we're doing it. We're going to go and get this weed. And we weren't doing it for hero status. We were doing it for the people. And, you'd probably pay between 12 and 13 euros a gram for it in the dispensary. We're asking another 30%, not a big deal in a city that's out of weed. And everybody in
Yeah.
Frankfurt, it's like Seattle, it's big time weed smokers. And in fact, Frankfurt's one of those German cities that has trash cans on every corner, just like Seattle. And we're walking through the city and they've got a hammering man, just like they've got in Seattle. It
Oh,
was a
wow.
fucking trip, dude, to see hammering man. And I was like, did they move it? They're like, no, we built this after you built yours. And like, little side note, every time I'd tell people I'm from Seattle, they're like, oh, Frasier. And I'm like, what do you mean Frasier? They're like, the show Frasier. This is from Seattle. And I'm like,
Yes.
you guys love Frasier? They're like, we love Frasier. And it's
I
it's
love
the
Frasier.
perfect show for like the monotone German public that's just like,
Yes.
I'm a Cheers guy. I don't want to watch Frasier, although it was funny at times. But that was the first thing they're like, oh, Frasier. Yeah, you like Frasier? And I'm like, yeah, I love Frasier. But
That's
we got all
hilarious.
this herb back to Frankfurt, and we ran out like 2 weeks before we left. But dude, we were smoking so tough, and like literal legends. Like all these people would
Yeah.
ask, like, where are the Americans? Because they'd want to hang out and smoke weed and all that too. But like, the Americans, the two of us. And I'll end it with this because I can keep talking and talking, but not the recording, but the story. The guys that we met up with in Amsterdam that were my brother's best friends, they're traveling around Europe at the same time, not kind of for the same reason, but and we did not coordinate before we left. Like I found out like a couple of days before we were leaving that they were leaving 2 days later to come to Europe as well. So they're somewhere in, they might have been in Poland or France. They were somewhere, and they call me up like, what are you doing? I'm like, dude, come to Germany, come to Frankfurt. Like, I got this city on lock. And they're like, whatever. I'm like, dude, I'm telling you, come to Frankfurt. There's chicks everywhere. The World Cup's going on. It's a huge city. There's food everywhere, and we got tons of weed and we're famous. And my buddy Tony's like, whatever, dude. We'll come to Frankfurt. So they show up the next day and they're staying at the hostel with us. We get them all checked in. They're like, damn, you know some people. I'm like, yeah. We go to the park and like everybody knows me and the guy I'm traveling with. And Tony and George are just like, holy shit. And like they're like, can you get us some weed? We're like, we're actually the dealers in this town right now. It's like
Right now.
yeah. So they ended up staying there for like 3 weeks, and we all partied
Oh,
together.
wow.
It was like crazy too. And these are guys that like sat on my couch as youth and smoked joints and bongs. I was like the older brother that had a place before everybody else, so they'd come and get stoned at my house. And then we go to Amsterdam and meet up and smoke. And then they come to Germany and are like, you did what? And we're like, oh yeah, dude, we went with all of our money. And like literally we had probably about 30 euros when we got back to Frankfurt. Like we had saved enough money for gas, didn't guarantee that we were going to have anything to eat. Thankfully, we're staying for free at the hostel. And I mean, we kind of like not nearly doubled our money, but smoked like crazy. Probably made back about 2K the 15 that we spent. And then, dude,
That's epic
crazy stupid,
status.
but such an awesome story. So,
Yeah.
um,
That's
I've seen a lot, and experience. Like I say, perspective leads to approach. And so these days, I don't know what I make of the industry. And, we used to sell a lot of seeds, a lot of clones. And as you get canceled and lose pages, like Instagram's been a nightmare just to stay alive. I've lost some huge pages that it took 10 years to build. And so you go from being relevant to like unknown overnight. Kind of crazy,
because of a number. Yeah. Because of a number.
I've had a
Dude, first of all, that's freaking epic. That is, I mean,
it's a big
when
story.
yeah, everybody has been there. Like you've gotten to a destination, you're there to have a good time, you can't find anything. You try
Yep.
everything. The normal people, like nothing is happening. And then like a fucking ray of light coming down from the clouds. Like you will never forget that person. You will never forget that moment because everything of doom and gloom about what you were looking forward to just went bing. It could have rained
Dude.
all day. You could have been
Yeah.
horrible food. You would not have cared. So
Not
that's
even a
epic.
little bit, dude. And it was one of those things that like, we'd been there for a day and a half, 2 days, something like that. And my buddy's complaining about the fact that there's like no weed. I'm pissed that there's no weed. And it
Yep.
took us 20 minutes to make the commitment because like we decided that we wanted to do it. I went to the sports betting place right after that. We rented a car an hour later and then left.
Ignorance
And
is bliss, man.
yeah, it was just, we were used to doing shit like that back home anyway, but just not on foreign country crossing borders. Like,
That's the thing. That's the ignorance is bliss part. You're like, yeah, how bad could it be? I mean, I drive to
how
Portland
bad
all
can
the
it
time
be?
and back just to, I
Yeah.
go to Portland and back. That's, there's plenty of speed traps. I see plenty of cops on the way. I'm fine.
Yep. Yep.
And
Oh, man.
yeah, you're just like, yeah, why not? How come nobody does this?
Well,
Well, there's good reason. You find out later, but in that moment, you're just like, yeah, fuck it. Let's go for it.
fuck it.
One
Yeah,
thing,
dude.
yeah. Well, one thing people don't realize too is like, you mentioned some of the prices and, 2 ounces of hash. Hash over there is usually cheaper than the flower. And it's the good
Yep.
stuff like the
Yep.
Moroccan,
Oh,
Lebanese,
dude.
Poly. So when we go there for the haze and we go there for the hash
Oh,
because
dude,
I don't really think
100%.
people grow good hazes here at all, or at least they don't
Nope.
let it go long enough. The Dutch totally have
Yep.
it down. And then everybody here is like dabs, concentrates, the BHO. I like that traditional old school hash, which you find in
Likewise.
all the coffee shops. So yeah, those are the two things we go for. And it's funny because they're usually the two cheapest things on the menu. The Cali menu is like $20 to $30 a gram, which is blows
Right,
our freaking mind. Because that's the
dude.
cheap stuff over in the stores here.
Yep, yep, 100%, dude. It's they're trying to catch up at this point, you know. It was the travel epicenter of cannabis for a long time, you know, and the days of walking into Barney's farm and being able to buy some caramella cream at $15 a gram are
Damn.
gone. You know, that was our first destination. I would go and buy 5 grams of the caramella cream right when I got to Amsterdam, right off the train, head to the right out of Schiphol or whatever central station, and the Rockery was right there, and then Barney's farm was right there. And
Yep.
Barney's weed was, you know, whatever, but they had the hash, dude. And back when ice hash was becoming like the isolators, and
Mhm.
dude, we smoked a bunch of hash. Now, mind you, some of the best dispensaries carried very little hash, like the Gray Area. I don't know if you've ever been to that one. It's DNA's
Yep.
coffee shop right
Yep.
by the On Frank house, and tiny little coffee shop. For those who don't know, DNA's
Tiny.
coffee shop called the Gray Area is like got,
Tiny.
dude, there's like 6 or 7 tables max, and they have a like an automatic coffee maker in the back, so they're legally a coffee shop. And like I can remember asking the dude one time, I was like, "Hey, can I get a cup of coffee?" He's like, "You don't want to drink that. We made that last week. It just sits there, so we're legal." And I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, we heat the same shit up every day. We don't even brew fresh coffee." It's like, okay.
Gnarly.
Um,
That's gnarly.
but it's a totally different experience there. And I got to tell this story too. I've told it on my channel, but in 2008, I went with like, I probably had about 6 or 7 grand for 2 months. And towards the end of my trip, I was flying out of Schiphol in Amsterdam, and I've got like 3 hours before I got to catch my train to go from Central to Schiphol. And I have like €5. And I also had a $20 bill, American. So I head to the Gray Area where it's all
Mhm.
American guys running it. And the guy recognizes me from being there earlier in the trip. And he's like, "Hey, dude, what's up?" And I'm like, "Not much. I need you to do me a favor." And he's like, "Sure, what's that?" And I was like, "I need you to sell me a dub sack." And his eyes just get huge. He's like, "I haven't heard that term." And I bust out a 20 US. And I'm like, "Bro, I need a dub sack." And he's like, "Oh, this is the greatest day ever." He ended up giving me like 2.5 grams of C13 haze and the Mean Martian Green, which are definitely electric sativas. And I had like, at this point, I probably got like 2 hours before mind you, I've got my giant backpack, my guitar, my little backpack, and some other little thing that I was carrying.
Knocking
And I've
people
got it
over
just
as you
sitting out.
turn around.
Yeah, dude, 100%. So I've got to like lay all my shit outside the store. I go in, pop the $20 bill. The dude's like, "I've never sold a dub sack in Amsterdam. This is the greatest thing ever." And so like I roll up these doobies, and I am power smoking them right out front of their shop, like on the sidewalk there. They got a chair. And this one dude's watching me. He's like, "Bro, what's going on?" I was like, "This is the end of a 2 month trip, and I got to catch a train. And I didn't expect him to give me this much weed, and I've got to finish it. And I'm smoking it all right now." He's like, "Good for you, you know?" And like I'm fucking stoned, dude. I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. I go in and tell the guy working the counter, I'm like, "Dude, this is awesome." He's like, "Bro, you made my fucking year with the dub sack thing." I go and like put my bags on. I am so stoned that like every 10 feet, I'm like checking my pockets to make sure I have everything. And I'm like almost certain I left some at the coffee shop. And so I'm walking back with all my bags again. The guy's out front and he's laughing. He's like, "You forget something?" And I was like, "I'm almost certain." He's like, "No, the fuck you didn't. You're just way too stoned. Get out of here." And like he was right on the money, you know, like I hadn't forgotten anything. I was just sativa fucking stoned. Get on the train, get on the plane, and I think I was flying. How did it work? I went from Amsterdam to Heathrow and then was trying to fly out. I missed my flight in Heathrow
Oh
by like
no.
15 minutes on check-in because the tube station had shut
Oh.
down. All these insane issues. I was staying with a guy for one night there. So I missed my tram, show up to the airport. My flight's already boarded, can't get on the flight. And they're like, we can get you on a flight tomorrow. So I'm like stuck in this little spot of the airport that doesn't connect to any other parts of the airport. They're doing construction. There's nowhere for me to sleep. I read Lord of the Flies all the way through that night.
Oh,
Um,
geez.
my buddy had given me 20 pounds, so I was able to buy like I didn't smoke cigarettes, but I couldn't smoke weed there. I didn't have anything. So all of a sudden I was a cigarette smoker, drinking these free coffees that they were giving me. And I show up to the ticket counter the next morning and the girls are like, dude, we were calling your name out all day yesterday. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, your flight's still today, but we upgraded you to like business class, which is like above
Hey,
first class. Like never
dude, on
flown
a
like that, dude.
10-hour
So
flight, I'll take it. Holy shit.
dude, the seat leaned all the way back. When I got on the plane, I was exhausted because I'd been trying to sleep in the airport all night. I fall asleep, and the dude, when I wake up, he's like, "You were snoring like a motherfucker." And I'm like, "I am so sorry." He's like, "Dude, all of us agreed that you were so peaceful and that you looked so in need of the sleep that it didn't bother us." And so like I wake up and the lady comes and she's like, "You missed your meal." And I was like, "Well, what was it?" She's like, "We were serving French toast and this and that." I was like, "Can I still get it?" She's like, "Oh, absolutely. I'll go make it fresh for you." And I'm like, "Make it fresh?" She's like, "We got a little kitchen for business class." And I was like, "Does that French toast come with ice cream?" She's like, "Oh, absolutely." So like I'm
Get
eating raisin French toast with bacon and ice cream on my flight, and I'm looking around, and the dude next to me flies business all the time. He's like, "You've never flown business before." I'm like, "Bro, I'm 28. What the fuck are you talking about?" You know? And like, oh man, I got a lot of good stories from traveling over there, and it's all part of the weed world, you know. Like I've seen a lot, and that's kind of what gives me the perspective of still remaining compassionate as somebody that's not on the inside of the industry, but has been in the backstage section for so long, and all these new people come into cannabis and uh they all have different things that they want or chasing or whatever. And hold on one second.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. I'm gonna grab a drink here real quick. My cotton mouth is
Yep,
kicking in.
do it.
It's
Dude,
so
for those
bad.
of you guys that don't do a lot of the live streaming, it's crazy. You can get into, you're trying to get in place at the desk with the cameras and get set up and just get set up for the lives or whatever, and then you're recording and God forbid, you have to take a piss or get something. I have to walk away from the camera a lot. And Gabby's always like, "You can't do that. You can't leave dead air." And I'm like, well, that's why it's nice to have a co-host, and shit, when there was
Yes.
4-hour Instagram lives, we'd be live with people the whole night. And I could see it in my buddy. I was like, "You need to go and use the restroom. I'll take over from here." And he was like, "Oh, thank God." Like your brain shuts off and you're there because building the brand is what it is for guys like us, right? We have to have that in front of camera time and talking about the genetics and um
You see your
it's
teeth
a lot of
floating,
work.
you're like, okay, he's got to pee. Yeah. No, and again, perfectly. Thanks for covering that. Cause yeah, I usually do sit down. I'll always have coffee, but I'll usually have water or something. Cause you keep coffee and cotton mouth, like that stuff compounds on itself. So you need
Yep.
something there to
Yep.
wet the whistle. Dude, that's cool. You got to fly back, business class there. I've only been bumped once, up to first class, and yeah, I'll never forget it. That was the greatest thing. And I'm sure I looked like the person who never flew first class either. Because I was like, get out, I'll take another cookie. But
Oh, dude.
when it comes to
I've
the
got a good one to go back to one of the stories real quick. So my buddy and I traveled to go to Germany for the Cup in 2006. We started off in London because of his sister. We were able to find weed. We bought a pipe at this one shop. We were leaving London, so I stashed the pipe in Hyde Park at the top of this.
oh
It's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
7 feet tall, and so I climb up, dig all the soot out, and put this plastic bag, cover it with dirt. We're flying out of London to go to Vancouver, BC, and then home. And we go to the park. The pipe is still there in the plastic bag. Nobody has any idea, right? And we don't have any
Damn.
weed at this point. We're smoking the resin out of the bottom of the pipe, and we'd smoked a couple of grams through it. We're scraping the bowl. We got stoned. We were broke. So we took all of our stuff and found the longest grass in Hyde Park, which you are not allowed to be in the park and you're not supposed to sleep there either. So we go into the deep grass and we like lay down all of our stuff's around us, our bags, and it's like 9 in the morning and we hear people. And I say to my buddy, he's like through the grass. I'm like, dude, there's people in the park. And he's like, oh shit. So we're like peering around through the top of the grass, trying to like make sure nobody's around. We see some bobbies go by, and then we get up and we get out of there, right? And so we're like stoned. We've got this pipe. We ended up just giving it to some random dude at the park,
Right.
and we get on the plane from Heathrow, fly to Vancouver, and we're in the area where you're already checked in internationally, and so you just go to your next flight. And they have a little bit of checkpoint there. My buddy's wearing this Heineken hat. It's like a Dutch Heineken hat. It's got a green brim with a tall orange cone on it. It was
Oh,
huge during the World
jeez.
Cup. And he's fucking wearing it at the airport, dude. And all of a sudden, like we're in different lines going through. All of a sudden I notice my buddy's not there. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I happen to look over to the right, and he's behind this big glass wall with all these cops. And I'm like, oh fuck, what's going on? Like, did he say something to somebody? And then he points at me, and I'm like, oh fuck.
The fuck?
So they bring me into a holding
Yeah.
section in Vancouver, BC, and
Oh,
they go through all my stuff. Like they're going through it completely. And the Canadian cops like asked me, he's like, you've got like 30 kinds of rolling papers. What are these for? I was like, they're for smoking weed, fuckface.
no.
And
I have a
he's like
wiping
surprised by
problem.
me being, yeah, I was just like, you know exactly what those are. I just came from Europe. We smoked a fuck ton of weed. Like I'm just rubbing it in his face. And he's like trying to find any scrap of weed. And I'm like, dude, there is nothing in there. I'm not an idiot. He's like, well, your buddy is. I'm like,
Hmm.
what the fuck are you talking about? Well, just so happened that we were in Amsterdam and he was wearing his North Face jacket that he only wore while he was there. And he had stuffed a couple grams in his jacket. Totally forgot about it. We get to BC after we've flown from Amsterdam to London, got on a plane and flew to BC. And it's got like an Amsterdam coffee shop sticker on the bag. And like, so he's under arrest. And they're going, dude, they're like literally taking underwear out and looking through anything they can find. All my pockets, they've dumped the whole bag out. And and it was like a younger guy that was like the, I don't know what those cops are called, the customs cops or whatever.
TSA. Yeah.
Yeah, and this guy's just being a fucking asshole. And so I'm just rubbing it in his face, like talking shit to him because I know I'm clean.
Right.
And he literally dumps all my shit on the floor and then leaves the room. He's like, all right, you can pack up and go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other cop was like super disgusted. He's like helping me pick my stuff up. And he's like, dude, I'm
Oh.
sorry. He's like, some of these guys, it's because your buddy's giving him attitude and cussing at him. And I was like, dude, I get it. You know, we're just dealing with the process. And he's like, thanks for being cool. I've missed my flight at this point, and they won't give me another one. And I'm at the airport in BC, and I have $70 US cash on me. And I go outside and I find the first cabbie, and I'm like, how much do you think it costs to drive me to the border where like Blaine and all that stuff is?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, probably about $140. It's like, he's like, it's an hour and a half away, and I got to account for time back. And we usually don't drive that far. I was like, if I give you $70, can you just take me as far as you can and I'll walk the rest of the way? He's like, dude, that's a long walk. And so he ends up driving me to like $95 and takes the 70, you know, because it's probably about the transfer rate.
Right.
And he's like, this is literally as far as I can take you. He's like, it's about 7 miles to the border, and I don't think anybody's gonna fuck with you at 1 a.m. on the side of the road if you're walking with all your stuff.
Oh my
So the
God.
cabbie drops me off, drives, and just starts heading back to the airport. I've got my big backpack, my guitar, a little backpack, and another bag. And I'm walking, and then I crest this little hill, and I can see the 300-foot flagpole with this beautiful American flag flying in the wind. And after all the stress of coming home and dealing with the airport, I was just like, oh my God, I'm home. First time, you know, by myself traveling outside of the country. And so I'm walking towards the border house, and there's like this big lawn with the flagpole. And I literally walk up to the flagpole and I like hug it. And I'm so happy to be home. And it's like 2:30 in the morning, and there's a guardhouse that you should probably like, people don't walk across the border there.
No.
So I'm walking to the
Peace,
guardhouse.
I'm assuming.
And I walk into the guardhouse. There's like 3 American cops. And they're like, how can we help you? I'm like, I just came from Europe and we landed in BC and I missed my flight. And so I like had to get a cab and I walked like all this way. And I was like, how do I check in for coming home? And they're like, you're the guy that was out there hugging the flagpole. You're just fine. Literally didn't ask me any questions. And they're like, you're good, brother. And I was like, you guys are awesome. Thank you. They're like, you look like you're glad to be home. I was like, man, the last 48 hours have been insane. And so I call my mom at like 2:30 in the morning. I'm like, she's in Bellevue.
Okay.
Can you come get me at the border, mom? Her car's not working. She has to wake my brother up. She gets his car, drives all the way up, hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes to the border, meets me at the gas station's got food for me, mom. And like, I get in the car and she's like, so what's going on? I tell her the whole story and she like doesn't want to talk to me for the rest of the ride home. Just like, oh,
Ooh, that's a long trip of silence, man.
yeah, and it got better as we went on. My buddy in jail, he's like,
Oh
in the airport
no.
jail. He's like, dude, they fed me teriyaki chicken. They gave me a bed to sleep in. They gave me a free flight home. He got home like an hour after I did.
What a
And it
dick.
was like this whole thing. So not only did we smuggle shit while we were there in Germany and Amsterdam and all that, but then we come home and we get busted. And the whole thing that sucked is we were smoking resin out of that motherfucking pipe. And he was wearing the North Face jacket when we were in London. There was weed in his pocket. I think it was actually Dutch Treat.
Oh,
And
that hurts.
so, we laughed about that for a long time because we were smoking the resin and we had a paper clip and we were doing, put the little arc on the paper clip and straight through the carb and pulling it out. And man,
Yikes. Dude, I
so
have been through that Canadian border many times, and it's one of those things. You could get it on this side of the border, you could get it on that side of the border, and you've been able to for a long time since, I mean, I think I was 19 when I went to Bulldog News in Vancouver.
yep,
It's
yep,
across the park, down on Hastings Street, and that was, you could
yeah.
seriously sit in a cafe and have your cannabis.
Dude, it
So
was a crazy thing, right?
yeah, it was awesome. And my buddy, we go up there every now and then, and we were coming back from it was a skate contest, and of course we hit that, and we're driving back, and we're getting close. We're within a couple miles of the border, and we've been rolling joints. We're breaking stuff up. We're like, fuck, man, we can't smoke it all. We should probably put stuff out. So we throw stuff out of the car. We're sitting there talking to the border guys, asking us questions: where you been, where you going, how long, blah blah blah. And we're playing it cool, and we get through, and we both kind of look at each other. All of the stems that we had been taking out of that weed the entire time were sitting right there on the lid of like our soda cup in between the two of us. And we just looked at each other like, fuck. Yeah. We were already through, but we were just like, holy so yeah, we got really
Yeah,
lucky that time. But Canadian border, I don't mess with it. And we're
no,
kind of
no,
weed
dude.
tourists. Like, we won't go anywhere unless we know we can get weed when we're there. So
Right,
yeah, we're not
right.
trying to smuggle flour.
No, and that's kind of the nice thing about pens, is like you can kind of get those through calling them vape pens. And we would used to go to Canada before we were 21 because you can drink when you're 19 up there, and we would
Yep.
go to all the strip clubs and all these party spots. And the first time we went up, my buddy had a box of photos in his trunk, just like photos from his life. There's like a picture from when he was 17 and he had a pot plant in his backyard, little tiny thing.
Oh,
They find this
okay.
picture. Dude, they
Eek.
tore the entire car apart, tore the seats out, and told us to put it back.
Yep.
And it was like a 3 hour process, dude. And they're like, you know, it's our job to make sure. And I was like, from a photo though, dude, like honestly, and he's like, young kids are put up to things that you'd never believe. And so we took their word for it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that was one of those times where we went to Hastings, and the first time we tried to get weed was at the 420 Club on Hastings. And these guys were just nasty to Americans, and they had shit weed they were trying to sell us. And we had bought a
Right.
little bit, and we're sitting outside, and this dude sees us smoking from across the street, and he comes over and talks to me for about 10 minutes. And he's like, "You want good weed?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "All right, let's go across the street." And there's this like kind of concrete alcove in this building with a camera and this metal door. And he said, "Look up at the camera and just say hi." And so I was like, "Hi, my name's Mike. I'm from Seattle." And the dude that was with us was kind of one of their door guys. And we hear
Mhm.
the door buzz, man, and he opens the door. He's like, all the way up the stairs to the left, and then enter the room, and then there's
Yes.
a little spot where you can buy weed. It's like
Been there.
150 stairs straight, all the way up to this
Yes.
fourth floor. And we get up there, and it's like this art lounge where all these fancy people are partying and smoking weed, and we're like the new guys. And we walk in, and everybody's like, "What's up, guys?" Like very, very kind, very polite, and they point us to the bar, and they've got like 10 different kinds of weed, and it was really fucking good weed, dude. We were super stoked. And um, we get our weed, we smoke with them, and we're like, "Yeah, we'll be back tomorrow." They're like, "No, you won't. We're open once a month, and you just happen to be, our buddy saw you getting fucked with across the street and wanted to show you a good time." Thankfully, we had enough
Nice.
for the rest of the trip, but dude, we were drinking our asses off and getting fucked with by hotel men that wouldn't exchange our money for the right rate. It was a nightmare, but we used to go up occasionally and get shit-faced drunk, drink a bunch of Molson Ice and Labatt's Blue.
Hams? No
Yeah.
hams? Come on. That's the Canadian beer
Yeah.
of choice,
I mean, it's like telling an Australian to drink a Foster's. They're like, Foster's?
right?
Never had it. So, um, we've been all over the place, and had a lot of different encounters with cannabis in the community. And one of my favorites was always when we went to the Oregon Country Fair. And
Nice.
I'd never been to the country fair. I met a guy out at the gorge one year. We showed up early. We'd stay at the White Horse. We drive into the back, and there's this like 300-pound, 6'4" hippie dude. And I show up, and he's like leaned over the side, combing his hair with his hand, just baked out of his mind, just like, you know, making
Been
sure his lock
there.
looked pretty. Yeah, I'm a long hair too. I just got it all tied back. But so he's like combing his hair in the sun at like 10 in the morning, and he's just this big animal human, like one of my favorite people. And I see him, I get out of the van. I'm like, "What's up, dude? My name's Mike." He's like, "I'm Russ." And I'm like, "This is for you." And I hand him a piece of TGA ripped Bubba, just absolute fire at the time. And he's like,
Nice.
"Whoa." And he like tries to hand it back to me. I'm like, "No, that's yours." These guys are like great party animals, stories. We've been to same shows, just never met up. And at the end of the event, he's like, "It was great meeting you." We exchanged numbers. He calls me a week later and he's like, "Hey, I got this thing at the Oregon Country Fair. I run a crew, and if I don't fill my spots, I lose them at the end of the cycle and they go to another crew. Is there any way you'd want to fill a spot for me this year and work security?" And I was like, "Sure, love to." And for the first 2 years, I did that, and my wife stayed at home before we were married anyway. And um, dude, it was from midnight to 6 a.m. So you're taking a bunch of you're around a
Okay.
bunch of
Yeah,
people
yeah.
partying, and you're at a security checkpoint, and the sun comes up every day while you're still working, which is great if
Ouch.
you're on an adventure. But when you're working and like all these normal people are waking up and you're just like, just like 2 hours out of the peak. And so I ended up meeting Josh from Dragonflyers Medicine like 6 months later. And we talked about weed for a second, we talked for about an hour, and 5 minutes we were talking about weed and life. And then we were talking about meeting up, and I was like, "Yeah, dude, I can't meet up in July because I do this thing called the Oregon Country Fair, and I'm there for like a week." And he's like, "Oh yeah, you like the country fair?" I was like, "Yeah, dude, it's super cool." And he's like, "Yeah, I've been going for like 23 years." And I was like, "Oh," immediately like took the wind out of my sails. And he's like, "Well, I've got this new crew that I'm running, and you mentioned that you're a carpenter, and we're like building a bunch of decks and stuff." And so we'd go for a month now, right? Because we were doing pre-fair and post-fair breakdown
Wow.
setup in the beginning. And this is like, have you been to the country fair?
No, but I know all about it. It's in Eugene,
Okay.
correct?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
there's this area right inside of the fair. It's called Craft Lot. It used to be where a bunch of people that were staff camped, and they opened it up as a part of the public. And it's this probably 5 or 6 acre field. And there's like booths around the outside that sell food and trinkets and country fair stuff. And then plopped in the middle of it it's just this big grass area. And we had these 3 or 4 trees that were probably like 20 yards from each other, but the interior we turned into like Peter Panville, like decks at different
Nice.
heights. And so for like 3 weeks we were by ourselves at the fair, driving trucks around, picking up materials, setting things up. And there's no public, there's no anybody, so we were smoking, brother. Like, and Josh,
I
like me,
bet.
is a straight reefer head. So we'd bring a pound and a half to fair and go through it in a month. Like, it was incredible. And like, It was one of my best times in life of smoking because it was just like Josh and I weren't one-upsmen, not trying to outdo each other, but like as soon as the joint was down to like a quarter, we both felt the need that there needed to be more joints. And so the second year, I rolled up like 10 bats for the first day, and he was like, dude, that was so awesome. Like we needed that. It kept the crew going. And so he gets to the fair the next morning. He's like, dude, I got 21 joints for the second day. And I had 22, but I had to smoke one this morning. I was like, dude, it's all good. So like literally we would just blow bats all fucking day, dude. And it was a month and a half of just family time, smoking weed nonstop and eating super healthy, staying hydrated,
Right.
drinking their dragonfly cocoa and um but I've had a lot of experiences that were really cool smokeouts, but that was like you're staying somewhere in, and we were in teepees. Like Josh and Kelly had a teepee, and after 2 years, I was like, "You guys mind if I buy a teepee?" And they were like, "Okay, that's cool," because they had the big 20-footer, and we were setting their teepee up one year. Josh and I are trying to pull the skin down, and like I'm pulling on this one spot, and it rips like 2 feet across, like 4 feet up from the base.
Oh
And he
man.
looks at me, he's like, "Dude, take it easy." I'm like, "Bro, I wasn't tugging that hard." And he's like 5 feet around the teepee on this other spot. He starts pulling on it. It rips again, and then it rips again. And I was like, "See, it's not me." He's like, "Dude, we've had this skin for 20 years." So they order a new skin from the teepee company that's in Bend, Oregon, and someone brings it that's coming from Bend, drops it off, and I'm like, "Huh." So I like find the teepee company, and I'm like, "How much to bring a teepee to Eugene?" They're like $350. And I was like, "How much is the teepee?" They're like 1,700. And I had like 8 grand in my pocket at the time. Like weed game was fine. So
Right.
like I order a teepee to the country fair site. And I told Josh and Kelly, I'm like, I'm ordering a teepee. And they're like, "Oh, that's cool. How are you going to get it here?" I was like, "They're dropping it off." They're like, "No way." I'm like, "Yeah, I paid them $350 to drop it off." So we go and meet them at the front gate out at the country fair. And like, I guide this guy back. He's got a truck with all the poles on the rack and all the cloths and all the stuff. And these guys drive all the way back into the fair because I've told all the security, "Hey, they're with me. They're dropping off a teepee." And people are like, "What do you mean dropping off a teepee?" I'm like, "I bought a fucking teepee this year." And so, they drop
Gotta
all the
spend the
poles and all
money.
these people see us getting this shit, and that was the first year I had like a substantial amount of money saved for the fair because I wanted to give my wife $1,500 to go crazy and buy whatever she wanted. And
Nice.
anyway, I could tell stories for hours, and they're all cannabis related, and the industry's those special moments through time that it really meant a lot to you. And if you can get outside of the business side of it, which, I try to do from time to time, because unfortunately without the business side, I don't have anywhere to live, I don't have any food, I don't have any gas, and the world costs a ton, especially when gas is $5 a gallon and organic milk is $8 and $9 a gallon these days.
Yeah. Like I don't know how much time you have, but I'd love to talk genetics and the stuff that you're doing. I don't
Yes,
know if you want to save
let's
that
do
for
that.
part two or if you've got time today,
Dude, I
because
got time,
yeah,
brother. Like we can
cool.
keep going. We're into it 2.5 hours and still holding strong. So I'm ready to roll all day. And I actually have a bunch of like seed packs and stuff next to me that we can do giveaways in the future if you want. Like I've got a